The Lekki Headmaster, read by members of the SciTeach book club. Chapter 1. Dusk. Something seemed unusual in the way the principal walked to the podium from the back of the assembly. He moved his tall frame rather ponderously. He was not as smart as he used to be. The trademark morning smile was not forthcoming. He took the microphone from Angel, the chapter prefect, and held it, saying nothing. This was in spite of the fact that the morning's pep talk was over and everyone was excited. All waited for the principal to speak, but the man looked blankly above the student's head instead of compellingly into their eyes the way he used to. He made an attempt to talk, yet words did not come. His head dropped over his broad shoulders as he began to stare at the colorful tiles on the floor. There was a heavy silence. The principal, again, attempted to speak. Tears. Everyone saw them. Tears trickled out of his eyes. He made yet another attempt to produce words. This time, the microphone dropped on the floor, sending a vexatious clatter out of the twin boxes at the assembly. More tears streamed from both eyes, competitively rolling down his sunken cheeks. Dozens of perplexed eyes, students and staff, fixed on him. There was nowhere to hide from the puzzled looks. Then Mr. Bepo Adewale hid in the only available space. He brought his palms together like a supplicant and shielded his face. The first person who found a voice was the vice principal, Mrs. Grace Ape. "What is the matter, principal?" she asked, moving to his side. 4 other members of staff joined her, but the principal said nothing. Instead, he sobbed freely. The school nurse, Mrs. Titi, fetched a handkerchief and offered it to the weeper. "Please conclude the assembly and let the students go into their classes immediately," the vice principal instructed the chemistry teacher, Mr. Justus Annabel. Mrs. Ape, the nurse, and Mr. Oyelana, the CRK teacher, started walking the principal back to his office, his face still buried in his palms, sobbing even more agitatedly. "Sir, what is the matter?" Mrs. Titi, or Nurse Titi, as she was fondly called, asked as they helped Bepo to his chair in the office. "Is anything the matter?" she asked again. Bepo did not utter a word. The tears did not stop flowing either. At 8:05 a.m., more teachers arrived to console the sobbing principal or possibly lend a helping hand. But the vice principal advised they go to their classes, exempting the guardian's counselor, Mrs. Beke Egbim. Consolations and questions resumed. For over 30 minutes, they petted Bepo. All the while, he sobbed. Occasionally, he would shake his head. He would look at the ceiling and at the faces before him, as though he had just returned from a dreamy wonderland. Then he would plunge further in tears. The vice principal's phones, meanwhile, had been ringing. Information had already reached some parents. They were anxious to know what had happened to the beloved principal. One parent learned that he was weeping uncontrollably and rolling on the floor. Another parent heard that he kept muttering, "Oluwa bami o, save me, O God." At this point, Mrs. Ape realized the best she could do was to call the managing director, Mrs. Ibidon Gloss, popularly called MD, who, but for a function she had to attend that morning, ought to have been in school. But the morning assembly had not begun on a tearful note. Since the management of Stardom schools came up with the shrewd incentive of lowering its boarding fees, the headache it used to have trying to tame lateness had reduced greatly. From 250,000 naira per session, the fee climbed down to 165,000 naira. The result was instant. More than 80% of the parents moved their children to the boarding house, which was a haven of modest comfort enjoyed by elite students. Almost all the students began to turn up at 7:45 a.m. for the assembly. That was far from the case before the policy change. Many of the learners came from different parts of Lagos, where the fear of heavy traffic was the beginning of wisdom. Interestingly, not many parents complained when the school almost immediately raised the fee for excursion and other items by 93,000 naira. Some staff gossiped about this, especially Mr. Audu, the fine arts teacher, who was a bunch of biting humor. He cleared his throat, pushed a finger into his mouth, drew it out, and pointed skywards. "In matters of economics," he quipped, I swear, the MD is a witch and a wizard rolled into one. Outdo his naughty grammar. The assembly had commenced early. The A-list school, located in the posh heart of Lekki, as usual, began the ritual with a short prayer in form of a recitation of the second stanza of Nigeria's national anthem, O God of Creation, direct our noble cause. Stardom did this on Tuesdays and Thursdays, while normal Christian and Muslim prayers were said on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, alongside the national anthem, first stanza. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the assembly adopted the second stanza as prayer. It did not bother to recite the first, but simply went straight to the school's anthem. Angel announced it was time for the pep talk. The principal had introduced this 7 years earlier. It involved the presentation of a speech by a student. It was spontaneous at times. At other times, topics were given ahead. Today's talk was, however, different, the way it sometimes happened. Iken Naibu, an SS1 student, mounted the podium to narrate his experience. He was part of a group of Stardom students that had just returned from an excursion to Jos, Plateau State. I saw Nigeria in its acrobatic beauty, he began, awakening cheers and applause. My fellow students, if you have not been to Jos, Ikenna paused and browsed their exciting faces as though he wanted to be sure they were really ready for the discoveries he was about to log into. He continued, You might have been to London, you might have been to New York, but if you have not yet been to Jos, you must be in that brilliantly beautiful city in your lifetime. Yells and applause greeted the narrative. One of the most memorable attributes of Jos is its very lovely weather, Ikenna said. Although we are in the dry season, Jos welcomed us with very cool arms. So chilly is Jos that I felt like sleeping every second of the 2 days we spent there. I can also not forget its acrobatic landscape. Not in any negative sense, but with rocks that sit in artistic layers and at times in dramatic postures. You could see a rock carrying 3 other rocks on its head. You could find a small rock confidently backing another, big enough to give birth to it. Another round of ovation. The narrator paused, then continued. Dearest stars of stardom, some of our hosts said Jos used to be more beautiful than what we saw, and that some violent crises had affected it. Notwithstanding, I can still confidently say it remains the leading tourism city in this country. No wonder many important white men were said to have lived there during the colonial period. Ikenna named some of the places the group visited, such as the Lamingo Dam, the University of Jos, the Shere Hills, Wase Rocks, and the Solomon La Amusement Park. If I have the opportunity in future, I would like to settle down in Jos instead of japping to Canada or London. A mixed yet fun-filled round of clapping and hollering filled everywhere as Ikenna returned and joined his classmates on the line. The chapel prefect then called for decorum and orderliness, inviting the principal for his address and announcement. Although Ikenna was a science student, he was equally a respected poet. His mom, a broadcaster, was an award-winning poet too. Following the young boy's captivating account, many students and staff expected a great comment from the principal, who had been an inspiring pillar at Stardom for 24 years. His impact had been so remarkable that his employers, parents, and other stakeholders regarded him as a school builder. He gave the students his all with an ever-burning passion to see them grow in all ramifications. On a day like this, he would be on top of the world. He would regard Ikenna's outing as evidence of the good education Stardom offered, in which he believed every Nigerian child deserved. The students also expected him to highlight some terms Ikenna might not have articulated so well. They were eager to hear something special from the tall, light-skinned principal, nicknamed the Lekki Headmaster because of the way he used to imitate characters in the old TV drama Village Headmaster when he was headmaster at Stardom Kiddies. It was his funny way of amusing the pupils. Sometimes Stardom students called him Principal because he never got tired of saying the pronunciation of principal should not end with a pa. It's principal, not principal, Beppo would emphasize. But of course, Mr. Beppo this morning was not on top of the world. He was under the world of tears. At her office on the second floor of the admin building, the MD aimlessly removed her glasses and aimlessly dropped them on a tea stool by her right. She never envisaged the frustration fast beclouding what ordinarily should have been a pleasant morning. She had driven down to school hurriedly after the vice principal raised the alarm about the principal's strange behavior. Only the previous day, the school had celebrated its over 90% success in the last West African School Certificate Examinations, WASE. The event ought to have held earlier, but it was postponed because the management could not immediately decide on the star prizes it wished to give. The school surprised all members of staff with snacks, bottles of wines, and 20,000 naira each for all SS3 teachers. Those who handled subjects where candidates scored distinctions, however, took home 30,000 naira each. The only teachers who had questions to answer were Mr. Obong Ukaku and Ms. Taye Karim, in whose subjects, chemistry and geography respectively, 2 candidates had Ds. But all the teachers escaped real trouble as no candidate scored F9. At Stardom, consider yourself sacked if any of the students you represent for WASE or NECO recorded F9. The previous year, not even a cousin of the MD, Mr. Funsho Daniels, was spared an abrupt exit. Following her arrival at about 9:30 a.m., the MD had invited Beppo to her office, asking what the problem was. 30-something minutes later, he had yet to state any reason for his distraught position. Instead, he kept muttering, "Thank you. I'll be alright." "Mr. Beppo, you keep saying you'll be alright, but you're not saying what the problem is. You are aware that given your position in this school and the excellent performance you have always put up, you are central to everything that goes on. You are supposed to be the embodiment of sanity, the balm to troubled nerves. In many cases, these are what you have been. But why have you suddenly turned the source of our anxiety?" "Madam, the principal managed to say, then broke down again. The MD became more agitated. She picked one of the 3 handsets on her table. She made a call, which 3 minutes later produced the physics teacher, Mr. Opewande, who was also a pastor. "I'm here, ma," Wande said as he walked in. He had missed the morning assembly, and besides the gist gathered from colleagues, he was only seeing Beppo for the first time in the day. "Principal, I hope all is well," he asked. "Not really, and that is why I invited you," the MD said. Wande stooped beside the principal and began to speak to him in a subdued voice. He asked what the real matter was and assured he would keep secret whatever information Mr. Beppo gave concerning his plight. Just like the MD had done, the pastor teacher also reminded Beppo of his cardinal position in the school and the fact that the news of the matter had already begun swirling miles away from the premises. Wande spoke to the upset principal for close to 10 minutes. Realizing he might have been talking to a brick wall, he turned back to the MD and said, "Ma, have we called Mr. Beppo's wife?" "I think we need to, and urgently too." Mrs. Bidonglos did not object to the advice. She asked the principal for his wife's phone number. This, Mr. Beppo wrote on the back of a card fetched from the breast pocket of his grey suit. The MD studied the card hesitatingly before dialing. It was an international number. "Principal's wife now lives in London, ma," Wande affirmed. "I should know. I wonder if he is not missing her badly," the MD said. The comment was supposed to be a joke, yet it elicited no laughter. None of the 2 lines the MD dialed rang. "Pastor, please accompany the principal to his office. I think he has to go home, really," she said. "I understand," Pastor Wande said, "but I think there is a little problem with that. It might not be a very good idea if he is left to go home alone in this circumstance." The MD understood the sentiment in the teacher's fear, but she felt pressed to move the drama away from the school as soon as possible. What would parents think if they learned the principal was weeping like a child? The school, an impatient spirit told her, was not a rehabilitation center, but a place for learning and earning money. Please guide him to his office and arrange to take him home, she said emphatically, adding, I learned that the guidance counselor was with him earlier. Perhaps he can go with him. He might also visit the clinic as soon as possible.
Chapter 2. The Enticement. After 5 days of interrogation and frustration, Mr. Beppo opened up. He was leaving Nigeria for the United Kingdom. He could no longer withstand the pressure to relocate, as his foot dragging over the matter had pushed his marriage to the brink. He very much loved Stardom schools, especially his students. He cared about them, wanted to continually be part of their growth. He found no sense in leaving them behind in a developing nation and joining the crowd working to further advance the United Kingdom, a developed country. But family was also keen on his mind, in the war to win him over. His wife had conscripted Nike and Kike, their 2 children, who all the while had been with her. He just had to quit and join them. Fortunately, he had already secured a teaching job in the UK. Of the 2 decades plus Beppo spent at Stardom schools, he was headmaster at Stardom Kiddies, the nursery, primary arm for 4 years. The foundation school remained constant in his professional history, especially because of the nickname it bequeathed to him, the Lekki Headmaster. Apart from the fact that he sometimes mimicked the village headmaster in the old TV drama series, Once Upon a Time, some of the teachers under him became so quarrelsome. Hardly would 2 weeks pass without a conflict being brought to his office for resolution. Given his humanistic and empathetic disposition, he often accommodated their agitation and even pettiness and resolved the issues. One day, during a staff meeting to resolve another quarrel, the clownish teacher, Mr. Audu, joked about Mr. Beppo's disposition. The way the headmaster masterly resolves this fight reminds me of the way King Oloja in The Village Headmaster resolved all the roforofos brought by his chiefs and villagers. So, as they had their own village headmaster, we also have our own Lekki Headmaster. Expectedly, laughter ensued. But there was more. A label stuck, which the many years that would eventually roll did not change, even after Beppo became the principal at the secondary school. Many still love to call him the Lekki Headmaster. A good number of Mr. Beppo's colleagues at Stardom found his reaction concerning the impending relocation funny, extremely funny. Of course, what they really had in mind was that it was stupid. Because how could one have such a golden opportunity and yet be sad and reluctant? Considering that thousands of people were sacrificing everything they had to travel overseas, his case was even enviable, they thought. He did not have to borrow or steal money to make the journey. He did not have to present a fake wife at the embassy. And in the UK, he would not have to look for a menial job, wouldn't have to clean dishes, as folks uncharitably say about washing corpses. His wife, Sari, was a nurse. Rumor had it that she could be earning up to £10,000 per month, a whooping bemu of more than 17 million naira. They swiftly multiplied. The teaching job Mr. Beppo got promised about £3,600 and other entitlements. As principal, his salary at Stardom was about 400,000 naira. Which one is bigger? 400,000 feeble naira or almost 4,000 heavy pounds? They converted the latter to about 6 million naira at about 1,700 naira for a pound. Why then would any rational being develop cold feet towards such a life-changing offer? But let us not forget that he will not spend the wage in naira. He will spend it in pounds. This is one factor many of us fail to take into consideration, said Mr. Oyelana during a gossip section, but Mr. Audu had a contrary view. Dump that argument, he exclaimed. No matter how much of it he spends in pounds, he will still have a lot to send to Nigeria. The fine arts teacher explained, "Just imagine if he sends £1,000 to Nigeria every month. That is over 1.7 million naira. You would want to compare Mr. Beppo that saves 1.7 million naira monthly to the one that earns 400,000 naira as salary. Are they on the same level?" The principal knows of all these and still insists he is not leaving. "I think Stardom's management has jazzed him, that is, bewitched him. This is unnatural. I have to find his wife's home address." "And what will you do if you find it?" Oyelana asked, bemused. "I will beg her to adopt me as husband. I am leaving for the airport right now," Audu said. He stood up immediately, picked a few books off his table, pushed them under his armpit, and walked out of the staff room, declaring, "I am heading to the airport for the next flight." His colleagues roared with laughter. Of course, everyone heard the bell. Mr. Audu was already late for his next class. Beppo's plan was to retire from Stardoms at the age of 55. That was still 4 years away. He had been thinking seriously about life in retirement. He had begun attending seminars on entrepreneurship. This was what he wanted to spend the remaining slice of his days on. He loved the freedom and confidence successful businessmen enjoyed. In spite of the fact that business enterprise harbors peculiar challenges, Beppo also loved to develop fellow men and his country. He pictured himself in a position where he also could employ workers, no matter how modestly, and give people opportunity to earn a living and pay tax to government. It was one of the tips he learned at seminars. According to one of his coaches, no employee should dream big about comfort or bank on job security either. Only a business owner could afford to do so, especially when the business had become successful. Beppo would also not mind establishing his own school. After all, he had garnered a lot of experience about teaching and school management. Besides, he was a trained teacher, having studied English history education at the University of Benin. This projection would give him an opportunity to push his passion for molding the young. His only reservation, he wondered if he would have enough capital to float a standard school. Given the taste he had already imbibed at Stardom, he recalled that a major principle of entrepreneurship is starting small. He did not object to this, but experience had taught him a lesson. It is better for the facility to be in an area where parents are able to pay for the kind of education he wanted to provide. He could not forget in a hurry how a neighborhood school, Fruitful Future, which he established alongside a friend, shortly after his National Youth Service, crumbled due to socio-economic challenges in the location. Of course, he knew his wife would not fund any projects that would hold him down in Nigeria. Beppo considered farming, food and sachet or bottled water businesses, but he also had substantial inclination towards commercial transportation. He believed it was a business someone with minimal capital could begin with. An option he could readily chew over was buying a bus or a cab and leasing it to a driver. A fact about transportation he knew was that you begin to make money from the first day the vehicle is purchased. It is not like farming, where you had to wait till the end of a season or cycle before your seeds or animals begin to yield. It is not like retail or distribution business either, where after getting a shop, you have to wait for customers to show up, customers who already have their preferred clients before you arrived. Besides, in many cases, buyers need to earn trust before patronizing you. But in running a cab or bus, passengers have no loyalty to any driver or vehicle. As a matter of fact, Beppo knew the newer your cab, the more attractive it is to customers. The problem with transportation, he learned, was that many commercial drivers one would have loved to engage lacked enlightened business practices. They were not trustworthy and often ended up ruining the dream. At least 3 members of the staff at Stardom ventured into it but ended up with regrets. The drivers frustrated the idea, defaulted in payments, and often told lies that the autos broke down. On some occasions, they colluded with mechanics to defraud the vehicle owners. In spite of these sad details, Beppo kept the option open. He believed there could still be a way out. There were, for instance, people who bought vehicles and let them out to drivers, who in return paid installments. He also felt that if big transport companies such as ABC and God is Good Motors could operate successfully, there must be a way around the challenges. For now, however, he needed to worry again about those dreams. He was set to renew his teaching career in a new environment, a new country where he definitely would earn more and share a new life with Seri, Nike, and Kiki. He knew that life anywhere is not a bed of roses, and every place harbored its challenges. He read the story of a Nigerian teacher who got rattled the first day he walked into a class in a UK school. One of the students was said to have asked, "Are you an idiot?" Yet, Beppo knew that such an incident, if true, must be isolated, and a good teacher should be able to handle that diplomatically.
Chapter 3: Migration Tales. After Beppo had finally made up his mind to relocate to the UK, he decided to pay attention to tales emanating from foreign lands, especially Canada, United Kingdom, and the United States of America. In terms of remuneration, he always knew that payment there could be hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. Unlike Nigeria, where one-time salaries were a feature of white-collar jobs, he liked the idea of hourly remuneration. It would make job schedules flexible, offering the employee an opportunity to change the job as often as he could. On the part of the employer, he would be able to closely monitor the worker. It neutralized the Yoruba proverb that says, "Oga ta, Oga ota, owo alaru ape." That is, whether an employer records gain or not, the employee will yet take home his full pay. The pragmatic wage system, he thought, must be one of the ideals contributing to growth of the developed world. A friend of his who lived in the USA told him one could earn between $150 and $250 per day, depending on the nature of the job and the location. He learned that one could work up to 4 days a week. If that happened, Beppo and many others who dreamt about Japa could earn up to $2,400 a month. They would quickly multiply that by about the prevailing 1,600 naira rate and arrive at what became a comparatively big sum of money. What such people often forget, however, was the fact that they would live and spend in dollars in the US or pounds in the UK, paying rent, taxes, maintenance, and others, in the hard currencies they earned. Yet, they felt whatever remained, if sent back home, still translated to good sums which many Nigerians could not afford to save. Also, Beppo gathered, there were people who earned far more than $150 or even $250 daily. This suggests there would be more to remit home or exchange to naira later. He was told that cab drivers earned better than people who worked in stores or toilets. He found instructive the story of a Nigerian who switched from driving to maintenance. The guy knew a bit of carpentry and was eventually invited for a maintenance job in the US. He earned $500 daily. Beppo marveled at the thought of converting the sum to naira. That meant earning up to 800,000 naira daily. His survey further revealed that skilled work was among the best options for anyone in any of the countries of choice. What could be more inspiring than receiving, say, $100 per head if you were a barber? As a result, those who understood the trends often advised intending immigrants to learn a skill before leaving Nigeria. Beppo also had learned painting during his last break. The relocation bug had caught on in the country in the past few years. Nurses, doctors, and other health workers, said to be enviably remunerated, had been migrating at an alarming rate. Even the government considered that up to 1,000 of the country's 3,000 doctors were migrating annually. Besides these, other people were leaving from all walks of life. Many graduates were fleeing, especially under the pretext of pursuing master's degrees. The fact that the education visa largely allows students to travel with their spouses and children made such people become desperate. Guys sold all they could to pay for accommodation fees and sundry requirements. These included houses, land, cars, as well as office and home furniture. There were indeed cases of some who sold what did not belong to them so that they could rightly be called the criminals they were. Some took loans from various sources and fled before full payments. Others paid back later from the countries they secretly relocated to. Yet, there were some that never even bothered to look back. Classical rogues. Beppo could attest to some of these practices from his experience at Stardom. There was the celebrated case of Mr. Uncle, who took a 2 million naira loan from the school's cooperative and 2 days after disappeared into the Japa wind. Also, one of the school driver who attempted to steal the bus in his custody confessed to the police he wanted to sell it and use the proceeds to send his son to college abroad. Beppo credited Sola, another young Nigerian in the diaspora, for giving him a fresh perspective on life in the UK. About 6 months earlier, Sola was the home economics teacher at Stardom. She was on a sick leave when she and her husband landed in the UK. She had called Beppo a day after they arrived in London and confided in him. They were a little close. Beppo had helped her when she faced sacking for setting up a crèche in the vicinity of Stardom schools. He led the investigation. Knowing how effective she was in class and the fact that she had just had her first child, he convinced the management that the crèche was merely casual. Sola only faced a 3 months working suspension without pay. However, monitoring by the school while she served the punishment revealed that she continued to work committedly. Eventually, all her entitlements were paid. Your kind of relocation is the most convenient, sir, she reassured Beppo during one of their phone conversations. Since your wife is here already, working as a nurse, you will have little or no stress settling down. I do not know her cadre or where she works, but nurses and other health workers are generally well paid in the UK. Also, you will not be burdened with having to work to pay your wife's school fees, as many spouses do here. In many cases, the husbands work while the wives go to school. As for me, I am working while my husband is pursuing his masters. He also works for some hours anyway. You will work, but not under much pressure. That is, hoping Madam cooperates with you. Another thing that makes your coming easier is that you are not boring your way through. Or are you? Beppo replied in the negative, revealing he had actually found a teaching job in the UK. That is what I'm saying, Sola added. My husband and I sold everything, and we still had to borrow about 4 million naira. But I don't have any regrets. I have just been about 6 months here in the UK, and I have changed jobs more than 3 times. The one I just got is more promising. It will fetch me up to €200 daily. And lest I forget, you won't have any challenge concerning what to do in the next 2 years, unlike spouses that are here for schooling. Finding the opportunity for continued stay is not a child's play. We all are just trying out our lucks. Sola said because she and her husband could not afford up to €1,500 or €1,000 monthly rent in London, they had to stay in Manchester, where they rented a non-furnished 2-bedroom apartment for €650 monthly. According to her, the space was not quite comfortable, but it solved their immediate needs. 2 major factors convince many who ordinarily would not want to relocate. These are great infrastructure and the opportunity for their children to enjoy quality education. They are some of the qualities that principally define developed countries, compared to what obtains in many parts of Africa, with Nigeria being a notorious example. Beppo knew much about this, having benefited indirectly. His children, Nikki and Kike, enjoyed free primary and secondary education like most other children in the UK. It was when Nikki went to university that she began to pay fees. Kiki was still in high school. His wife did wonderfully in this wise as she paid the bulk of fees in the UK. There were also education loans and scholarships for those who could not afford fees. These were the ideals many Nigerians sacrificed for, wanting their kids to benefit from a system that has a solid plan for children. My children are already in school, Sola told him, and they don't pay fees. Imagine what some of the supposedly privileged parents at Stardom go through to pay the millions charged. Beppo knew she spoke the truth. A good number of Stardom's pupils were from well-to-do homes. Some parents even complained that fees were too low. They felt the population became quite large on account of the paltry fees and did not want their children mixing with folks from low society. But there were other parents who struggled unimaginably hard to cope. Some pupils hardly fared well during fee-paying sessions. Many parents had to withdraw their children during recessions, and in certain cases, the death of fathers ended the sojourn of their children and wards. The case of Chief William, a popular rich man, highlighted the intricacies of private school education in the country. One day, the chief, who had lived so comfortably that he bankrolled most social programs as stardom, slumped and died. His 3 children could not complete the following term because the family could not pay their fees. To everyone's surprise, banks immediately swooped on William's assets because he was heavily indebted to them. The 3-year-old had a seizure and Sola called the emergency line 911. 2 ambulances and another car arrived at her home in less than 5 minutes. While the baby was conveyed to the hospital in one of the ambulances, Sola went into the car. The care the girl received was so impressive that the mother could not help shedding tears of joy. Betty was lucky too. Her birthday came while she was still in the hospital, the mom told Beppo. You needed to see how doctors, nurses, and everyone showered Betty with gifts. My daughter admitted she had never had such a birthday before. But there were feelers that neither London nor Toronto is a bed of roses. There were stories of fellows who became stranded in the otherwise posh cities. While some could not find any reasonable job, others that did could not cope with demands. Jared, a young chap who abandoned his banking job, recounted how he burst into tears when the stark reality of caring for an old couple in London dawned on him. Also, plans by some of the couples who migrated together sometimes crumbled like a house of cards. Such was the case of Hope, an accountant. He applied for and secured admission for a master's. His wife joined him in the UK to work and earn the money that would see him through, the way Sola and her husband did. But barely 4 months after they landed in London, and Hope began studying, the wife stopped providing for him. She complained that the demands of her job made it impracticable to keep sponsoring him. All pleas by Hope fell on deaf ears. He contacted his wife's parents in Nigeria, but they replied point blank that she had explained her situation to them and they quite understood her position. Of course, life is never a straitjacket, Babel thought, home or abroad. People have always had different results from life's intriguing tests. He recalled how an Idoma Benue man, a former co-tenant of his, used to say, Owo no ya kloleche no chelo lonjia, owoloma ya klaho olo noi honwa, indicating how the sugarcane and the bitter leaf brought different tastes from the same rain that nurtured them. In one of the recent migration tales, Rike, a woman who arrived in the United States in less than 3 years, was able to buy 2 houses in Ibadan, Nigeria. But a man, an academic, who had been in the US for over 20 years, returned to Ikole in Ekiti State empty-handed. The sad return was, however, linked to divorce from his wife. The woman, also a Nigerian, was said to have legally stripped him of all he had after he was found guilty of bigamy. I will not be paying a dime as school fee for my children till 2027. That is when my first son will go to university. But for now, all 3 of them are in foundation schools where qualitative and free education is guaranteed, Rike declared. She also invited 2 of her sisters to the US, but for the visa problems Wemimo, her brother and parents, last-born, faced. He would also have joined them in God's own country. She hoped to invite him as soon as he overcame the hurdles. But comparing Rike's case with Akindele's, who would not invite even his daughter. 7 years earlier, he migrated to the US aged 55. He was invited by a US citizen he met at a media company where he once worked in Lagos. He and his wife, married for 18 years, had just divorced. They had 3 children aged between 16 and 10. Akindele eventually got permanent residency in America, living thereafter with his new woman. His first job was freight loading, followed by a correctional service. He said the latter job was relatively less hectic than offloading large packets from trucks. Yet, he added that being a correction center was not a tea party either. Imagine sitting down, alert, for 12 straight hours, Akindele told Ige, a friend who was also dreaming to Japan. There is no easy job in America. Oyibo man does not want to know whether you are young or old. You will work for every dime. You get dollars per second and you do the work per second. I always pity some older Nigerians here. Did you know that some of our people who retired at various senior levels, including as permanent secretaries, still come here to work? I have seen 70-year-olds who migrated from Nigeria ending up as casual workers in America. You would find an elderly man shaking like a leaf tossed by the wind as he tries to sort meals or whatever he does. That does not concern the Oyibo man. You want to earn the dollar, you must be prepared to work for the cents. Akindele said he could not yet invite any member of his family, especially his children, because he needed time to fine-tune the plan with his wife, who was his host. He added that there was also the need to first solidify one's financial base before bringing in dependents.
Chapter 4. A case of visa denied. In his room at Adeniyi Jones, Ikeja, Lagos, Beppo was about to say his night prayer when the phone rang. He was undecided momentarily whether to answer or proceed with the prayer. He looked at the screen to see who was calling. Haba, he exclaimed. Why would this woman be calling so late? It was Miss Ignatius, the parent of a student. She was one of those whom Beppo believed was abusing the friendliness he permitted. Some and many indeed kept the relationship as official as possible. They limited discussions to matters pertaining to fees, books, discipline, punctuality, etc. But in Mrs. Ignatius' case, she overstretched the cordiality, discussing even her marital affairs with him. Beppo racked his brain trying to recall how it all started. He wondered how he could have allowed such personal dealings with any parent. How could she call him in the dead of the night? He has come again, oh, Miss Ignatius cried. Who, madam? Beppo asked, anger bottled within. And before she could respond, he added, Madam, check your watch. 11:55 a.m. Is it not too late for this? I'm sorry, Principal, but do you know that Ibe is not yet home? Beppo launched a silence that he knew would not be palatable to her. For God's sake, is it a crime to be a principal? He asked as he momentarily pushed the phone away from the range of his mouth, then shut his robust eyes as if the answer to the question lay in the dark. Banking on his 6-footer height and prominent eyeballs, he always jovially told the student that he was created to be a principal. According to him, once he was present in any class or hall, no act of cheating could go uncut. If you beat my heart, you can't beat my eyes, he would declare whenever he was supervising any exam. The fact was that the man seemed to have every trait maximally, if not in excess. His complexion, for instance, was as fair as that of the yellow ant that the Yoruba called Salamu, while he was a voice that hardly needed a loudspeaker, no matter the size of the crowd he was addressing. Beppo had another tale that the students often branded Tori. When I was growing up in the village and my family was working on my father's farm, Salamo used to bite my brothers and sisters, especially when we were harvesting kola nuts, whose trees one had to often climb. But Salamo never beat me because my skin bore the same color as theirs. That was the extent to which Beppo could be down to the earth in the school, though he combined humor and compassion with seriousness wherever required. What he, however, hated was being taken for granted or overstretched, as he believed Mrs. Ignatius was now doing.
He had told her that she needed to have a lot of patience to let the wound heal. She had wronged the man he believed. She had terribly wronged him, and the man had cause to be upset. As a matter of fact, he thought only very few men would still allow the marriage to hold in whatever form. A year earlier, the family had been planning to relocate to London. Mr. Ibe was a manager in an oil firm, earning what a bloody teacher like Beppo would call an armed robber's salary. But he became fed up with the system and bought into the Japa philosophy, vowing he was ready to sacrifice all because of his children. My children won't grow up here. They won't end up here, Ibe Ignatius had insisted. I want them to grow up in a sane environment. I don't want other children that are being trained outside the country now to return and lord this over my own children. Youths are leaders of tomorrow, not all youths. Many of the ones getting Western exposure will become the leaders. I work in an international organization, so I know what I'm saying. Apart from the sentiment in favor of the children, the economic advantage which relocation promised made it an adventure more and more people were willing to explore. It was all about dollars and pounds. All you needed to do was work in any place for many people, just any place, earn the hard currencies and be able to send home even $1,000 per month. Then, your life would not remain the same again. With a dollar exchanging for as much as 1,600 naira in the black market, it meant you were automatically saving 1,600,000 a month. How many people in the country were able to do that? How many earned 1,600,000 naira, or half, or even a quarter? How many in the country where lawyers could earn as low as 15,000 naira monthly, and some teachers were being paid the same or less as salary? Miss Ignatius greatly loved the JAMB idea. She had learned tailoring and hairdressing, including the traditional Yoruba irundidi, having understood that the craft fetched a lot of money in the UK. From the information she gathered, you could earn up to $100 braiding for a client. That, changed to Nigeria's currency, was some 160,000 for just crafting suku or any other Yoruba braid like koju soko and onili gogoro. While soko teased the sky with its cone-like waving, the koju soko braid pointed its tip towards the direction of the husband. Onile gogoro's cone was so extroverted that it threatened to kiss the sky. While preparing for a hairdressing career in Canada, Miss Ignatius had learned the bridal art a year earlier, before pulling out of a job as a clerical officer. The husband also had wound down his clearing and forwarding side business, preparatory to relocation, but something happened that scattered the plan. When the visa processing reached an advanced stage, a DNA test conducted on their 3 children showed that Ignatius was not the father of one of the kids, Favor, a 15-year-old SS2 girl at Stand-up. The family never remained the same again. What is the matter now? Beppo asked, after his long silence, which the woman felt lasted 100 years.
He still doesn't believe I did not cheat on him. He's now saying Favor and I have to go. Go where? He says we should go and stay with Favor's father. Has Favor learnt of the entire saga? Does she know about the paternity crisis? No, I don't think so. But there is a kind of suspicion on the part of E, her brother. He has been asking some disturbing questions lately. He says there must be a reason, a key reason. The embassy turned round and denied us the visas. I think he has read up why families may have visa issues. So, is he suspecting a DNA crisis? Honestly, I can't say. There was a stretch of silence. Then she added, Ibe left home 2 hours ago as we were discussing the matter. Principal, don't you think he might never come back? Beppo had no answer. He was equally set for his own relocation, believing he would soon have respite from the Ignatius saga. Experience taught Beppo several lessons about running an allied school like Stardom. He hoped some of these would be relevant in his next station. He knew culture and policies differ from one country to another, but no experience was a waste. Every parent wants respect, and many seek to keep their pride. Some are rich, considerate and humble. Some are rich, selfish and nasty. While all these traits reflect in the behavior of the children, they kept the management on its toes as it pushed to achieve goals. Beppo reminisced on some of the major incidents that defined his day at Stand-up. He hoped that someday he would detail this in a book. He prayed his job in the UK would give him enough time to work on his professional biography. Among the memorable stories he would love to share was the sacking of Mr. Ayesoro, the government teacher. At her GRA Lagos home, Miss Mary Ladele relaxed on the sofa, watching a movie. It was a Nollywood stuff, the type she liked, romance. Some 5 months ago, she had been a devotee at Z World, savoring Indian soaps that dripped with love scenes and intrigues. But recent visits to the cinema, where she saw about 5 Nollywood productions, rekindled her love for Nigerian films. It was around 1 o'clock p.m. Her 3 children had all gone to bed. She was the only person in the sitting room. Her husband, Dele, was away in Abuja, where he worked as a senior civil servant. The kids could turn naughty and cook up excuses to hang around the medium-sized plasma TV, but she had mandated them to always go to bed at 10 p.m. The youngest, Bimbi, was particularly notorious for waiting to flout the other, especially when her father was around. When you thought she had disappeared into the bosom of sleep, you looked in the direction of the sitting room door and saw her mischievous eyes peeping through the blinds. Then a mild battle would start between mother and daughter. It was Dele who at times pleaded for her or fought on the side so that she could stay awake till 11 o'clock p.m. On such nights, the mother would insist Dele wake Bibi up in the morning, knowing how tough it could be to get her on her feet. In the movie, a female physician, Dr. Ajayi, was about to conduct a cesarean section on Bimbo, a bosom friend of hers. It was a task the doctor was quite happy to undertake, aided by 3 other colleagues. 2 of these were invited from a general hospital nearby because of their expertise and experience. The third worked at Legacy Memorial Hospital, a private establishment. Many people had reservations about government hospitals. They dreaded them because of the large crowds they attracted, which usually left doctors overwhelmed. They were also often bogged down by inefficiency and corruption. Nevertheless, government hospitals were still famed for having some of the best consultants in the country. Therefore, regarding CS matters, many patients preferred taking the operation in public hospitals, and when they had to do so in private establishments, they opted for doctors from public hospitals on the team. It was the synthetic arrangement Dr. Ajayi had with Bimbo. For Miss Ladele, who had had the CS experience, watching the scene in the movie was an engaging treat. It was also good that the filmmakers chose to show the operation live. But what made the scene most captivating for Miss Ladele was an imminent bubble burst. Unknown to Dr. Ajayi, her husband was responsible for Bimbo's pregnancy. As the truth was about to hit the doctor, Miss Ladele, enthralled and caring little about her falling wrapper, inched closer to the TV, set to see how the painful truth would unfold. Just then, she heard a scream. It was Bibi. She rushed into the room and found the girl trembling, seated on the edge of the bed. "Mommy," Bibi cried as she saw her mother. Her brother and sister, Tim and Love, had also been rudely awakened from sleep, looking bewildered. "Bibi, what is the matter?" the mother asked as she carried the girl and cradled her in her arms. "It's Mr. Wala." "Mr. what? Who is Mr. Wala?" "Our government teacher. He appeared to me in my dream with his tribal marks." Tim stepped into the clear confusion. Bibi actually meant Mr. Ayesore, popular in the school for the deep tribal marks he flaunted. So prominent were the incisions that students named him Mr. Owala, a derogatory Yoruba appellation for a person with wild facial marks. Every time Bibi saw Ayesoro in school, she became scared. They met at the basketball court the previous week, when Blue House, to which she belonged, held its maiden practice ahead of the upcoming inter-house sports competition. Bibi screamed with fright as Ayesoro, who was one of the Blue House officers, arrived at the venue. Every effort by Mr. Ayesoro to allay the girl's fear was unsuccessful. Eventually, Bibi had to be reassigned to Greenhouse, where Tim belonged. None of the ladyless slept again that night. Twice, Bibi's mom tried to pet the girl into sleeping. Twice, the girl dreamt, crying out about Mr. Wala. Miss Ladele could hardly wait for daybreak to launch a complaint at Stardom. Worried that it could lose Bibi and her siblings to another private school, the management transferred Mr. Ayesoro to Stardom Hub, the property wing of Stardom Group of Companies.
Chapter 5. Snake in the roof. Long break, joyful sounds of people at every corridor. At the primary and secondary sections, the children never missed the opportunity to play despite the fact that it was time to eat. It was also a time when Principal Beppo and teachers on duty moved round to ensure there was no dangerous play. As one or two students had had an arm or the other broken in the past, Mrs. Ibidon Gloss has just uploaded her lunch. She escaped into a room in her spacious office for a little rest. This getaway was a top secret very few people knew in the academic community of about 1,500 folks, comprising students and staff. Yet, if the privileged few knew she had time out in any room, none really understood why. They never knew the health condition that plagued her buttocks, leaving her with a peppery pain whenever she sat for long. She had been to doctors within and outside the country. She had, in the course of over 30 years living with the condition, explored spiritually and traditional inventions, all to no avail. She, therefore, learned to live with it, especially as it did not immobilize her. Minutes after, she chose to alter her schedule a little by taking a walk around the surrounding, and she, in the end, thanks her stars she did. The MD decided a little intensively to exploit the opportunity to inspect a piece of land that Standium acquired 2 years before. That was some 5 minutes away from the back gate of the school. As she approached the gate, the two security men manning it stood at attention, with one hurriedly opening it as she gestures them to do. Both made a move to accompany her, but she asked one of them to remain on their duty post. On getting to her destination, she found out that, although the property remained fenced as the management had left it, about a half of the 3 plots were filled with cars of different brands. They were not new, but it was obvious to the Standium big woman that they were in use, and that some people were using the place as a park. "Our staff park here, ma," the guard, Jumbo, said to save the MD from puzzle. "Which staff?" she asked as she could not hide her shock. "Our teachers and the other staff." She was confused the more because she knew there was no staff car parked in the school, and she, like almost everyone else, knew who had cars and who did not. "Ma, it is not everyone that brings their cars into the school," Jumbo said in a tone that meant more than he altered. The MD took time to inspect the rides, wanting to know who owned them. Jumbo was right because many of the cars bore Standium school stickers, so many of her staffs were hiding their cars from management, she thought. She saw different brands and models, including Toyota, Hyundai, Venza, and Mazda. She even saw the big Toyota of some drivers called Mozu. The MD skipped a breath and shook her head self-pityingly. There were even 2 boxes at the far right of the park. One was white while the other wore the ubiquitous Lagos yellow color. Were some people cheating on her by engaging in public transportation? She felt more anger mixed with fear run through her system. She summoned the principal and the school accountant via a phone call. Too bad for her and too bad for the school. She thought something must be wrong. The school's purse must be leaking. How were the teachers getting money to buy those kind of cars? She further thought as she surveyed the park again. "Afternoon, madam," the accountant said as he arrived. "Accountant, what is happening in this school?" The MD asked. "Great things, madam." "Accountant, I didn't call you for motivational speech. What is happening? How safe is this school? How safe is our money?" Before the accountant, who could no longer hide his confusion, could say anything further, the MD added, "Where are all these monies coming from? Where the teachers and storekeepers and every gardener getting the money to buy cars? When did this happen? How did this happen to us?" Jeremy Amos, the accountant, now understood his boss' fear. She thought people were stealing to buy cars. He and the principal, who had also arrived at the scene, exchanged glances. It was an understanding that the latter should speak. Mr. Beppo therefore first ordered Jumbo to go back to school. By this time, the fear was quite palpable all over the MD's face. For the first time in a long while, she sweated furiously. "Ma, please let's go to the office," Beppo said. In the MD's office, the accountant and the principal assured her that the school's finances were intact. He noted that while some of the teachers had raised money for their cars through various personal means, including loans, the main source of financial strength for about half of those who owned the 17 vehicles was the school cooperative. According to the two principal officers, a good number of the members of staff were taking loans, which they had also been duly paying back. After all, the loans were being deducted from source. Yet, if the information did calm the MD down, it also raised another major question. How fat was the cooperative purse that it could guarantee those she saw at every Tom, Dick and Harry a choice car? And perhaps inadvertently, that was the way she asked the question. How much is in the account of the Stadium Cooperative Society that it could buy every fool the car of his or her choice? The word fool hit the two men like a thunderbolt. They did not find it funny at all. They again exchanged glances but managed to maintain their cool. Beppo was happy that neither the VP nor the physics teacher was at the meeting. Neither might have been able to stay so mute in the circumstance based on the extroverted profiles. The following day, she called a meeting of the board of directors, all members of the same family. The chairman, Chief Mrs. Solape Bayo, who was the MD's mother, Martins Bayo, a non-executive director, and Oye Bayo, the last born, who was the board secretary. Not willing to take any chances, the MD asked for details of the cooperative society's account from the accountant and the principal. In the purse was 95 million naira, while over 50 million naira have been loaned out. It is like hanging a snake in the roof and going to bed, Chief Bayo said. What if the staff rebel and jointly establish their own school with the money? They would have stolen our brand ideas and every other thing about us. The board weighed the threat and unanimously reached a decision, which guided the cooperative ever since. No staff member could borrow more than 250,000 naira. Also, all loan requests have to be approved by the MD, and the management must be duly informed about the cooperative's election.
Chapter 6. A day as well as the day comes versus come. Open day were very important at Stadium School. For the management, it was an opportunity to update parents on academic activities. A staff meeting was held prior to each edition. It needed no reminder. Teachers and non-academic members of staff knew it was a day when they had to look their best, especially because they would have personal encounters with parents. Generally, Stardom encouraged and in some cases compelled its teachers to look presentable. Some had even been fired for flouting dress code instruction. At the end of a session, the best dressed teacher was identified and presented with an award. The event was a promising moment for many teachers too, including the principal. It proved that the reward of teacher did not have to wait till they got to heaven. Some parents came with gifts in cash and kind for specific staff, especially class teachers. The Abayi family was outstanding. Smart Abayi's mom, Mrs. Nike, would give the school several packets of beverages. Her husband worked in one of the leading beverages companies. But open day was also dreaded by teachers because parents often came with trailer loads of complaints. Any teacher who had offended any people, genuinely or otherwise, deliberately or inadvertently, would receive packets of bottled anger. Mr. Beppo recalled an episode Mrs. Ibudun Gloss had sent for him, asking him to appear in her office urgently, with a parent, Mr. Guta, seated in a chair in front of the MD's desk. Beppo greeted the door as he walked in, but the MD indicated she did not need any pleasantries. Where is Fafore, the one that calls himself an English teacher, she asked. In the staff room or in the class, the principal replied, sensing there was trouble. Wherever he is, whatever he is doing, find him. Tell him to hand over all the school items in his care and disappear from the premises. Draft his calculator and let me sign it within the next 30 minutes. The MD below. Shocked, the principal looked Mr. Guta in the eye, searching frantically for a clue. He saw none. Not in Mrs. Glow's face either. The parent did not betray any sympathy for the teacher about to be flung out of a job. Rather, he looked calm, reassured and pacified by the sack order. If there was an instruction Beppo hated, it was issuing a sack letter. He had done so a number of times. The management rarely sacked anyone directly. It executed what he considered a dirty job through his office. He always felt pain when anyone had lost a job, especially for issues he felt were not grave. There were times when no one could really help matters, such as in the case of a teacher who the previous term was caught altering a student's result for a fee. Some had been sacked for perennial incompetence and child abuse. Suspected or proven, Mr. Beppo remembered that the management, through his office, had also booted out some whom he believed were either not seriously guilty or not guilty at all. Just helpless, victims of circumstances or even conspiracy. Whatever the offense or its magnitude, Beppo always felt a void in his heart every time a colleague lost his or her job. Perhaps that was because he had experienced joblessness before. He understood what it meant for a family man like Fafore. What Mr. Beppo considered the most embarrassing moment of his life happened while he was out of job. An ugly situation had forced him out of the school where he worked. He had no savings and no new employment was in sight. At the height of the financial drought, he ate the 2,500 naira electricity tariff he collected on behalf of tenants in the crowded Face Me I Face You house, where he lived in Ipaja, also in Lagos. To cover up the deed, he lied that he remitted the cash, but as the Hausas say, Kulum Tabarawu, Ranadaya Tamikaya. Every day is for the thief, one day is for the owner. One day, NEPA electricity men arrived and disconnected the power cable. They threw down on everyone. The furious tenants rained insult, curses and mockery of Ogatisa, as he was called. The most aggressive complainant the God-forsaken day was Iya Matthew, the no-nonsense wife of Mr. Audio, a co-tenant. The short devil grabbed a full bowl of elubo cassava powder. Since her hand could not reach the headquarters of the skull, she jumped, rocketing her stumpy frame off the ground, and dumped the bowl on the teacher's head. Immediately, Mr. Beppo became a white man, and as though the cassava flour baptism was not enough, Iya Matthew spontaneously burst into singing, Ogatisa Ole, Ona Uwoina, Ogatisa Ole, Ona Uwoina. The teacher is a thief. He has spent the electricity tariff. Madam, what is the matter with Fafore? The principal asked the MD. Mr. Beppo, please do what I asked you to do first, then come back later with a query, or you could send the query to me electronically. Rather than get to his office and send for Fafore, the principal went straight to staff room. According to an Igbo proverb, miracle anage anogologo ege niire, warning that hot water does not stay too long on the tongue. The English teacher was not in the staff room. He was in the SS2 class. That meant Mr. Beppo would have to do something. He was very much detested, stopping a lesson halfway. Good morning, class, the principal greeted as he walked in, and without taking an excuse from Mr. Fafore, he addressed the students. I need to urgently have a word with your teacher in my office. Be responsible while he is away. And before he could ask, am I making sense? Some students had teasingly helped him out, while others chorused laughing, yes. Fafore did not like the interruption, but he had to obey his boss. He thought about handing over his note to the class prefect so that the students would copy it, while he attended to the principal. But this was no longer permitted at Stadium. The management stopped it years back after a parent sued the school. The parent, an accountant with an oil company, learned that his daughter, who was blessed with very good handwriting, was asked to scribble a note on the marker board for others to copy. He had advanced counts bordering on exploitation, cheating, oppression, and visual exploitation. His lawyer further argued that the teacher was indirectly imposing a career on the girl. According to them, she might become influenced to become a teacher, whereas her parents wanted her to study medicine. On the allegation of visual exploitation, the parents said the teacher subjected his daughter to corrosive eyes that might have sexually lead at her as she stood in front of the class. The matter was eventually settled out of court after a lot of pleas by the school, and while the student was compensated with one tuition fee term. The teacher was suspended without pay for 3 months. The English teacher remembered the case. The principal too did. Fafore decided to let sleeping dogs lie and even snore as they liked, by leaving the students to themselves. Mr. Fafore, what issue do you have with the management? Mr. Beppo asked earnestly when both men got to the principal office. The management? I have no problem with anyone, Fafore answered. When did you get to school today? 7:30 a.m. Did you flog any people? No, I don't cane students. Did you have any argument with any parents or the management? Or when actually did you get to school today? Principal, why these questions? Why would I argue with anyone? You know, I hardly come late. Candidly, the principal knew Fafore hardly arrived late to school, although he lived quite far away. He planned his itinerary in such a way that he, rather arrived very early. Like many other members of staff, he could not afford to rent charge in Lekki area. A 2-bedroom flat could cost more than 2 million naira, with most landlords demanding 2-year rent upfront, beside other expensive charges. Successive governments had tried to compel landlords to charge less and give less stringent terms. Official declarations were made to that effect, but they had rarely enforced or were simply unenforceable. This led some critics to believe the authorities were not sincere. They argued that the same government that claimed they wanted landlords to charge lower rents were fond of slamming high prices on their housing schemes. When a 2-bedroom flat built by the government cost about 10 million naira, how would the masses benefit from it? Despite being a graduate of 22 years, Mr. Fofore's salary remained 175,000 naira. How could he afford a million naira rent per annum? How could he buy the government flat when all he needed as initial payment was a 25% deposit? Besides, residents knew there would be other unadvertised charges. Fafore's first solution to the housing challenge was to rent a 1-room apartment in Ijayi, near the boundary between Lagos and Ogun State, in the Iyana Ipaja axis. He paid 170,000 naira per annum. After he got married, he moved further away to Sango, where he rented a mini flat for 300,000 naira per annum. 3 years later, he purchased half a plot of land in Ifo, a little deeper in Ogun State, where he built a 2-bedroom apartment. He had barely completed building the facility when he moved in with his family. As a matter of fact, 2 years after, he had yet to plaster the house and had neither installed a bath nor a toilet. What mattered to him most was the joy that he was no more a tenant. He had become a landlord, a bona fide member of the community's landlord association. He paid rent no more. He lived no more in fear of landlords who often behaved like land gods. The only sacrifice he made daily to guarantee punctuality at stardom was permanently maintain shorter nights at home. He woke up later at 4 a.m. and set out for school at 4:30 a.m. Thus, he would get to the premises by 6 o'clock a.m., rest his head on his desk, and snooze for about an hour before his colleagues arrived. There were about 5 teachers who ran a similar schedule, living in the Ifo, Ojo, and Ofada axis of neighboring Ogun State. The principal was aware of this and should ordinarily not have raised any query pertaining to lateness. Fafore had indeed twice won the most punctual teacher award. "I'm sorry I have to bombard you with these questions," Beppo said, relaxing a bit. "But there is a problem, a major problem. The MD called me to her office. She is very angry, livid. By the way, I wonder if you had any arguments with Mr. Guta, the father of Dora in SS2 and Nicholas in JSS2. Fafore said he had no discussion with him, let alone an argument. He came to the class, he checked his songbooks and said nothing before he left. Well, it seems he left abruptly, perhaps angrily too. Given the way he stormed out, he did not have any words with his son or me. Definitely there is a problem. The MD says you have to go. Go where?" Fafore crashed into the sofa of the office, sacked. How? Why? Questions raced through his mind. His thoughts flashed to his home, where his wife was heavily pregnant. He had also yet to complete the payment of his children's school fees. He had to put the two of them in a school near the abode in Ifo. Apart from the long distance to Lagos, he could not afford Sadom's school fees. The management gave teachers who had been in the school up to 7 years the concession of paying only 50% fee on any child. Other charges remained sacrosanct, like those for books, feeding, uniform, etc. Yet Fafore could not buy in. He would still have to pay up to 250,000 naira each on the children if he had to school at Stadium. When he returned to the staff room, he found some of his colleagues were already discussing his matter. He wondered how they knew, but of course, at Stadium School, information travels faster than light. Fafo, what happened, Mrs. Ose, the Igbo teacher asked. Before he could answer, 3 more questions had already jumped out of the mouths of other staff. Honestly, I don't know, Fafore said as he began to sort personal items on his desk, indicating to his colleagues that the ordeal was real. The staff, visibly unhappy, wondered what went wrong. It was a lesson to them all. There was no job security in the establishment. What do you expect when you are working in a one-man business? Audu asked, unusually serious. I have always said that the job we have is the type that the wind can blow away anytime, any day, depending on the mood of our employer. I think we shouldn't allow the matter to go on like this. What would you do? What power do you have to change anything? Do you want to fight your employer? The agri teacher, Mr. Obi, queried. Just then, a message came from the principal. All teachers were to congregate at the MD's office for an emergency meeting. It was at the meeting that the still enraged MD announced why Fafore had to quit and why others could soon follow suit. But no sooner did she begin to speak than she stopped and winced. If pain fed her buttocks, she had sat down for hours during the day. Now her bone had begun to revolt. She screamed and readjusted her backside on the chair. Her face reflected a mixture of 2 distinct troubles, Fafore and her distressed bone. Everyone that saw her, however, believed her countenance was all about the embattled English teacher. Armed with a double-barreled frustration, the MD declared she was fed up with the embarrassment teachers were causing the school whenever they demonstrated incompetence, especially in the presence of parents. This school will no more tolerate incompetence, she dropped. We employed you because you said we are professionals, whether in math, biology, government, or English. Once you show that you are raw or more illiterate than the woman from whom you buy onions and pepper at Obalande, then you have to go. I'm sure some of you must have learned that Fafore, the so-called English teacher, is leaving this school today, and I think the principal too will, henceforth, have questions to answer. If you cannot monitor your teachers, if you do not check their notes, and parents have to uncover the abomination we all too have eliminated internally, then you are bound for trouble. Imagine a supposed English teacher. This is what a parent who labors day and night to pay his children's fee found in a note Fafore gave the student. Mrs. Ibudun-Gloss collected 5 notes from the secretary, seated on her left. On the right was the principal. She had asked the secretary to randomly gather the notebooks from the class Fafore handled. The MD then opened a page and pointed out what she believed was a grammatical atrocity. Ade as well as Jide comes early. The MD read. She observed the staff, eager to see shock written all over their faces. This was what the parents, Mr. Guta, saw and became so angry. About that, he threatened to withdraw his children from the school. What sort of an English teacher or any kind of teacher would say, Ade as well as Jide comes, instead of Ade as well as Jide come? Ladies and gentlemen, a teacher like Fafore, Mr. Ade as well as Jide comes, has no space in this school, she submitted. Is this the reason we are sacking the mama? The principal asked with a chuckle. Is it not grievous enough? The MD asked. Some of the teachers murmured in her support, or at least in a mid-protest against the way people trivialized the matter. The principal's response infuriated the MD greatly. At once, she thought he also might not survive the scandal. So, Bepo, Ade as well as Jide comes is your position too, and your estimation of what represents the standards of the school. There is nothing grievous about the statement, Bepo began, unruffled. There is no error whatsoever. It is a piece of standard English. As a matter of fact, we have to quickly call Fafore back and update Mr. Guta too. I wish he had not left. More importantly, we have to call Fafore back. What he told the student is correct. When you use and, the verb that follows is come. But when you use as well as, together with, alongside, etc., we go for the singular verb with s. The clause is the subjunctive mode and does not align with normal grammar rules. Not impressed by the blasphemy, the principal was muttering. The MD directed everyone to bring out his or her smartphone and investigate the assertion online. Interestingly, all discovered that Fafore and the principal were right. Mr. Guta was wrong. The MD was wrong. Silence. The MD had ranted publicly about an error that didn't exist. She had set in motion the sacking of a guiltless employee. She had embarrassed hard-working Fafore. Now she felt deflated. Some teachers felt sorry for her. Others thought she could have been more discreet about the affair. No one knew exactly how to break the ice, but Mr. Adu was on hand to save the day. He cleared his throat and confessed he had something, even more important, to add to the grammatical trial. Everyone waited to hear what that could be, especially as the English question had already been roundly resolved. I just want to say that Mr. Fafore, he began, picking his words heavily, as well as the principal, he continued, is correct. And the MD, Mrs. Ibudunglos, is hereby pardoned, discharged and acquitted. The room rocked with laughter. Adu had done what he knew best. He stood to his feet, smiling mischievously, and gave the already amused Mrs. Ibudunglos a Japanese bow. I'll do if I lay my hands on you, she returned. Principal, give him the sack letter as soon as you collect it from the great teacher, Fafore. Everyone laughed again.
Chapter 7, Ritualist. Bebo joined Tandem Schools after a stint at Busway Group of School, located on the outskirts of Lagos. He wondered if he could ever forget the clash he had with the Busway management regarding an error he spotted in the school's name. As the senior English teacher, he had pointed out that the name ought to be Busway Group of Schools, not Group of School. He noted that the phrase group of implies there were more than one school. Therefore, the singular noun was incorrect. Sir, it is like saying a group of men, where we mean a group of men, he explained to the director, Mr. Egimeko, or like saying a collection of bags or a bevy of birds, instead of a collection of bags and a bevy of birds. Which one is bevy? Meko asked, as if that was the only aspect of Beppo's argument that interested him. It means a large group of people or things, like a herd of cows and not a herd of cow. The director thanked the learned linguist, as he often called him, for the observation. Then he asked what exactly the senior English teacher wanted him to do. He knew where Beppo was headed, but he feigned ignorance. In the recess of his mind, Mr. Meko actually laughed derisively because he could not contemplate changing his school's name in any way. Firstly, he reasoned, that was the name on all the school's facilities and documents. Secondly, it was the name registered at the Corporate Affairs Commission and the Ministry of Education. The most important reason I cannot change the name of my school, Meko explained to Beppo, is that the name was divinely inspired. If I will put it in another way, I will say it has a spiritual undertone. I believe you understand, because you are not a kid. What has group of school got to do with the quality education we impart here? Do you know how well my students have been performing in external exams? Talk less of internal examinations. Group of school. Are students complaining? No. Are parents complaining? No. Are the external examiners complaining? No. Is the government complaining? No. So, Mr. Beppo the Englisher, let's leave this matter as it is. I know there is no word like Englisher. Just joking with you. Ironically, there is, sir. Beppo struggled to correct his boss, even if he had to overlook the error in talk less. He knew what the director ought to have said was, let alone. You don't mean it, Meko exclaimed ostentatiously, pronouncing minutes in a way he believed was super British or American. I do. It is even in the dictionaries.
It refers to a person who translates from a foreign language into English. Wow, that means I'm almost an Englisher too, director said and added, considering that I even used the word offhead. Beppo skipped a breath as the erroneous phrase offhead struck him, but he did not think the atmosphere was right to begin another round of correction. Besides, he felt the first grammatical blunder which the director ought to have accepted most readily was being downplayed. Beppo thought, what was the big deal in changing group of schools? Firstly, the management could start by effecting the change on the school's signboard on the premises, then move on to all files, books, etc. It could then proceed to the Corporate Affairs Commission, the Ministry, and other relevant bodies. After the unsuccessful encounter, Beppo again raised the matter with the boss a couple of times because the grammatical palaver was happening in his subject territory. It was particularly insulting of his pedigree as the senior English teacher in the school. But something happened that finally made Beppo shut his mouth. During a meeting of the school's Parent-Teacher Association, a parent raised the matter backed by some others. As she spoke, the director fixed his eyes on Beppo, who was sat in the front row. The look was fierce and furious. The director appeared to be asking, "So you have taken your madness to this level?" Immediately the meeting was over, the director summoned Beppo to his office and accused him of plotting to destroy the school through his too-know mentality. Beppo explained that he never did what the director had in mind, that is, tell the parents about the error in the school's name.
Ẹlẹ́fọ̀ọ́ ó ní ó lẹ́fọ̀ọ́ kì í ṣe ẹ̀fọ́ àtàn, ta ni kò mọ̀ pé ara ló ń fún.
The director said, referencing a Yoruba proverb about guilt. It told the story of a hawker of vegetables plucked from a filthy tomb site. A buyer simply calls out to her, having no intention to probe the source of the product, but burdened with guilt and seeking to assure the buyer of feigned quality. The hawker retorts, "These vegetables are not from any dump site." Beppo did all he could to convince the director that he never had discussed the matter with any parent. He even swore touching the crucifix that hung from his neck. It was Beppo's characteristic way of declaring, "I am saying the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." Whenever he desperately needed to make a point, he reached for the object. While that was enough to make some people believe him, the director remained unconvinced. "You can choose between working here or criticizing the name of the school that pays your salary," he said with a tone of finality. Beppo's experience at Bisway was quite tumultuous, but it was not on account of wanting to correct the group of school blunder that he left. He walked away voluntarily because of a matter he considered ungodly. He was not a great churchgoer. All the same, he believed he was close to God. When his wife was still in Nigeria, she used to lure or coerce him to go to church on Sundays. He often left her behind at the auditorium as he had a habit of disappearing as soon as the service ended. Sari was a member of 3 groups in the church and often attended post-service meetings. Beppo was originally a Catholic, but the woman convinced him to join her Pentecostal church through Teller's mission. As soon as she relocated to the UK, however, he returned to his Catholic faith, where he felt at home. It was 2:30 a.m. The almost pin-drop silence in Ojikutu showed nature maintains a disciplined order, no matter the place or time. Here was a Lagos suburb, ever busy during the day and through the night. Now it was calm, quiet, save for an occasional whistle by some security guards. Beppo lay on his bed in his room at Bisway staff quarters. He had forced himself to bed at 12 o'clock a.m., but sleep just wouldn't kiss his eyes. He had slept lavishly in the afternoon, being a Sunday. Whenever he spent long hours in bed during the day, he was sure the nights would find him miserable, searching elusively for a nap. He wondered what he must do to fall asleep. He thought about sedatives. Sadly, he
he had none in the room. He was aware doctors rarely encouraged their use. The drugs could, among other risks, lead to addiction. But at night, when the goddess of sleep became too miserly with her drowsy bosom, Beppo cared less what any doctor thought. He would toss a capsule or two down his throat. Moments afterwards, he would snore. He rose up from the bed and headed for the refrigerator in a corner of the room. He needed a cup of cold water. Perhaps that might do the trick, he thought. He had switched off the lights in the room. He barely needed it as rays from the floodlights positioned at different corners of the premises lit the room faintly. He peered through the window, his dried eyes viewing much of the large space that included the assembly ground. He moved closer and drew the blind sideways. Suddenly, the floodlights went off. Every light at the length and breadth of the school premises was off. What happened? Yet, Beppo noticed that 200 meters or more away from the school lights were still on. As the puzzle lingered, Beppo thought he saw something move in the dark. It looked like human. Then he saw another, and another, and yet another. What could they be? He studied the shapes intently. As the movement continued, it became clearer what the mystery was. Of course they were not ghosts, they were humans. But who could they be? He stared harder through the darkness. His eyes were not betraying his mind. A thought flashed through the void. Beppo's confusion thickened. It was 2:51 a.m. No student was expected to be out at such an unholy hour. No teacher either, or resident. As his eyes attuned in the darkness, Beppo picked out 5 men. He also made out a large whitish thing moving alongside the men. It was a cow. Apparently, one of the men was holding the leash. Beppo, glued to the spot, watched in amazement. The men stopped. 5 minutes later, 2 other men appeared. It seemed initially that they had literally walked out from Mother Earth. Not so. The duo had actually climbed out of a pit. There was a brief moment of inactivity. What could they be doing? What could they be discussing? 2 of the men moved to the rear of the whitish thing. No sooner had they positioned themselves than the beast began to inch towards the pit. What is going on? Beppo thought, mystified. They certainly are not about to bury a cow, he thought, bewildered. He turned swiftly from the window. He grabbed his crucifix, hung it on his neck. A t-shirt lay beside his pillow. He put it on, complementing the night trousers he wore. Beppo shoved his hand under the bed, retrieved a broad-headed, double-edged machete, and was soon descending the stairs. "Who are you?" a voice out of the darkness questioned as Beppo walked with resolve, yet cautiously towards the figures. If his ears did not play any pranks on him, he was sure the voice was familiar. "I asked, who are you?" the voice repeated. Director, Beppo exclaimed, astonished. "Director, are you burying the cow alive?" "What? Who is this?" one of the men barked. The indignation in the voice was unmistakable. "Will you keep your mouth shut?" another man ordered simultaneously. "And get away from here immediately before we make you regret," a third voice roared. "You again, Mr. Beppo. What business brings you out at this hour? Is this the students' hostel you are supposed to be minding?" the boss asked. As the director spoke, the men quickly turned their attention away from the intruder. Resolutely, they hasted to finish the grim task, pushing and pulling harder. "No, Director, you can't. This is cruel. This is animalistic, ungodly. You shouldn't bury that thing alive," Beppo affirmed. "Get lost. How is that your problem? Are we burying a human being?" the director fumed. "Even if it is not human, it is living. Director, this is wickedness, inhumanity. A man who all the while had locked in dark unseen approached Beppo from behind, club in a hand. He raised the weapon and brought it down hard on Beppo's wrist. The machete fell off to the ground as a sharp pain crossed through Beppo's limb. Two other men rushed towards him. There was a brief struggle, and soon, Beppo was on his back. Even in the darkness, he could make out the shape of the machete positioned menacingly above his head. "Handle him gently, gently," the director ordered. "Oga, no, sir. I said no, sir." One of the men replied defiantly, then added, "If he wants to go down with the cow, why should we stop him?" Beppo recognized the voice. It was the man that had threatened, "Get away from here immediately before we make you regret." He knew it was time he disappeared from the scene. The director pacified the angry accomplices and helped the senior English teacher back on his feet. He led Beppo back to the room from where, earlier, he had stormed out like a crusader. Then returned to finish up the dark assignment. A million thoughts danced crazily in Beppo's head. The remaining hours before daybreak were unusually longer than he ever imagined. The live burial of a cow, the threat against his life. Everything seemed like fiction. Did that really happen on the school ground? Was that actually the director he thought he had always known? What was the reason for the bizarre action? Why did they have to bury a cow alive? What did they hope to achieve? He had heard tales of airy rituals carried out by some school owners and patrons of other businesses. Shortly after he concluded the National Youth Service Corps scheme, he and a colleague set up a neighborhood school. The colleague was a teacher in the public school. Since Beppo had yet to find an employment, they decided to start out small in the education center. They rented a 2-bedroom flat, and fruitful future school was born. The dream unfolded slowly, but enrollment began to grow at the 3rd session. They ensured fees were lower than what obtained in the area. They also tried to up their game, using marker boards. At the time, most of their competitors were hooked on chalkboards. Beppo also introduced a business trick he learned at the school in Warri, Delta State, where he observed his National Youth Service. Pupils were encouraged to teach their parents a topic when they returned home. The topic, of course, was among the ones they must have learned during the day. Parents particularly found it a novel idea. It reassured them that quality teaching was taking place at Fruitful Future. Thereafter, good news about the school spread, and before the end of the 3rd session, the number of pupils had grown to over 70. The fees stayed minimal. Some parents defaulted, but Beppo and his colleagues saw a great future for the school. Mr. Ogo, a parent, visited him in his office one Monday morning. The father had recently paid the 3rd and final installment of his boy's fees. The school permitted such mode of payment. As Mr. Ogo walked in, Beppo, who was the HM, that's headmaster, felt the man had something important to share with the management. "I know you are trying hard. Many people are saying good things about your place," Mr. Mego said, as he muttered prayers for the HM and the school. "Thank you," Beppo responded. "Yes, but there is something else you need to do. Thanks, like adverts." But Mr. Ogo was not thinking about adverts. Beppo could not believe the crux of the meeting. The parents had come, offering to perform a rite that would supernaturally flood the school with pupils in no time. What was the magic? He would sprinkle a few grains of corn at corners of the school, following which unprecedented enrollment would follow. And what would happen to the grains afterwards? Beppo asked, not because he was keen about any ritual. He was simply inquisitive. "Nothing much.
You need not mind them again. What is important is that the process will translate into abundant enrollment. Students will be trooping in from left and right, Mr. Ogo emphasized. The parent-cum magician added that the money needed for the ride was not much, just 35,000. Beppo and his colleague refused to buy in, even though demand persisted. Shortly afterwards, Mr. Ogo withdrew his child from the school. Beppo believed Fruitful Future would become a great without ritualistic shortcuts. He believed the same success would apply to many other schools in the country, with experienced teachers who are well paid, an environment conducive to learning, and an inspiring curriculum coupled with good school-parent relationship. Any school would grow and prosper. He knew schools that were so committed, they even had Saturday lessons for students who cared to attend. He knew schools that engaged in specialists to team up with their own teachers whenever WAEC and NECO examinations drew near. He knew schools that motivated their teachers so well with inspiring health, housing and retirement packages. There was even the well-reported case of Heroes Heaven, which offered a 2-bedroom apartment to any teacher that spent up to 15 years in the school. So why would he and his colleague delve into any ritual to build up Fruitful Future? Sadly, the school did not last as anticipated, as no sooner access roads in the area collapsed. Apart from prolonged neglect by state and local governments, a giant pipe ruptured, making a mess of the environment. As time went on, frustrated residents began to move away, leaving the place to only the helpless who could not afford Fruitful Future's tuition, as low as the fees were. Even more unfortunately, the headmaster and his colleague could not raise any substantial fund to relocate from the area. The lofty dream thus ended as they were forced to close down the facility, while Beppo resumed at another school for his first professional teaching experience. 10 years later, however, Beppo sat one evening watching the news when the anchorman reported of a Mr. Ogo who murdered a civil servant, a woman who had consulted him over her infertility. Having been married for 7 years without a child, the woman approached Ogo for a spiritual solution. Over the course of a year's treatment, the spiritual doctor received 9 million as fee from the woman, promising the charms he gave would make her pregnant. However, nothing happened. Disappointed, the woman insisted on a refund. When the children manufacturer was not forthcoming, she threatened to have him arrested. As the narrative went, the spiritualist one afternoon invited her to his house on the pretext that he was ready to make a part payment in cash. At this point, the news anchor man warned that some viewers might find the upcoming images disturbing. The camera turned to the scene of the murder. It was a large garden at the spiritual doctor's backyard. He dragged the client and then ushered her onto a chair, which, unknown to the woman, was deviously placed atop a grave-sized pit. No sooner had she fallen in that 2 club-wielding accomplices appeared from their hideouts and pounded her. She was still breathing when they sealed the pit. Beppo thought the face of the suspect on TV struck a chord. Yes, he had seen that face before, but where? Just then, the cameraman zoomed point blank on the alleged culprit, and there, flanked by armed policemen with handcuffs, looking like a fowl drenched in a rainstorm, was Mr. Ogo. Beppo was depressed, confused. He contemplated reporting the Bisway director to the police. But was he ready to face the impending battle? Firstly, he wondered if he could muster enough resources to mobilize the police and probably some other law enforcement agencies. Did he have enough money to push the case all the way? He knew he could be asked to pay for the sheet of paper on which he would write his statement at the police station. He knew he might be asked to fuel the police vehicle, with which officers would go and arrest the suspect. Did he have enough financial strength to withstand the director in protracted court cases? It occurred to him that he could contact relevant agencies or non-governmental organizations, like those involved in animal rights. But did they exist in Nigeria? He was not sure. What about the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education? Yeah, that could be it. After all, the director was endangering the health of the pupils, Beppo thought. But was he ready to launch into the river? Was that the prime thing he wanted to do with his life? What if the big man became desperate and began to fight him in strange ways? By the way, what was the motive behind burying a cow alive in his school? Did he, Beppo, know? Was he sure? He was still reviewing these thoughts when his phone rang at 9:07 a.m. He had neither taken his bath nor performed any chore, let alone resume work. The phone rang twice again. It was the director. Good morning, Mr. Beppo. You have not resumed at the office today. I asked the secretary to call you. Can you see me in the office now? The call compounded Beppo's dilemma. He never said he would come to see him. He didn't say he would not neither. But what could he do? He knew it was time to leave this way. Thus, before he showed up at the director's office about 2 hours later, Beppo had moved his belongings, both in his room and at the staff room. The director apologized for the assault Beppo suffered and explained that what the senior English teacher stumbled upon over the night was nothing dangerous or occultic. He said it was actually part of a special prayer for his late father, who had given him the land on which the school was built. Beppo did not answer him a word.
Chapter 8. Missions Unaccomplished. A legal tussle between the families of two of his pupils stood out among matters Beppo would leave unresolved as he stepped out of the country. He wished the matter did not linger. What began as a child's play has lasted 3 years. It seems like a joke stretched too far. An unbelievable bitterness left to fester publicly. The school had launched the process of choosing a new set of prefects. As usual, it would be elective. The Standard management believed it was important to introduce the learners to the democratic culture as early as possible, even at the primary section. The emergence of class representatives were democratic. Pupils were encouraged to indicate interest and go through the process from start to finish. They bought forms at cost that depended on the offices they were vying for. Intern forms from the position of head boy and head girl were sold at 50,000. Their deputies 40,000 and 25,000 for all offices. That included chapel prefects, health prefects, social prefects, labor prefects, and punctuality prefects. After purchasing the forms, the aspirants would be screened by a panel constituted by the management. The panel comprised both academic and non-academic staff, as well as 2 observers drawn from the school's alumni association. After the screening stage, Stadium sought to ensure each intending prefect were above average academically. He or she must always have a good moral history, especially in school. The aspirants must have been in the school for up to 2 sections and was not expected to owe fees. The debt-free condition was golden as far as the management was concerned. For this, Mrs. Ividon Gloss has a witty saying, "If you want a debtor to lead fee payers, ask a tenant to lead the landlord." It needed no explanation. On the day, the aspirant faced the 5-man panel. Each was expected to read out his or her expression of interest later and speak to it in about 3 minutes. It was a way of gauging their power of communication. Once the screening hurdle was scaled, the list of candidates would be read at the assembly. This would enable the voters to know them and also raise their objection via letters to the panel, which in turn ensured it protected the identity of any petitioner. The list would be posted on the school main notice board for 2 weeks. after which the candidates would address the students at the main anticipated speech day. The election was held the following day. Stardom Schools was sure it was following a coup process, but something happened which terribly hurt the arrangement that year and eventually got the democratic tradition suspended. On speech day, Banky, an SSC student contesting the post of social prefect, became so emotional that he employed arguably a vulgar language on his key opponent, Tosh, also an SS2 student. At a point in his presentation, Banky said, "Instead of voting for the son of an ex-convict, cast your vote for me. You will never regret." The student cheered as he continued the presentation until the principal rose from the table where he sat with the members of the officiating panel. He was disappointed at Banky's choice of words, calling the father of a fellow student an ex-convict. Before Beppo could talk sense into the contestant, Tosh had stood up from his seat and began stomping out of the hall. 3 teachers rose to pacify him and bring him back, but he was resolved, resisting violently as he hasted away. "Banky, why would you call the father of your fellow student an ex-convict? This is morally bad," the principal reprimanded. "While a child may have all the strength to cut a tree in a forest, it's the elderly that can tell the direction the tree would fall." The managing director of Stadium Schools found the adage most apt. Beside the fact that protests greeted Tosh's exit, his fan calling for upright cancellation of the speech-making event until he was brought back. The rivalry between him and Banky predated the program. It ran deeper than what played out because it involved parents of the duo. One day, Banky and Tosh were in JSS 3. They clashed in the Best Dancer category at the end of the year party. Both were finalists in the hip-hop category and competed fiercely for victory. So outstanding were their performances that the audience were sharply divided on who carried the day. The judges also were stunned. Eventually, they crowned Banky on a 3-2 vote, but Tosh's mom, who was in the crowd like Banky's mom too, felt slighted and complained bitterly against the decision. She and her husband later wrote an official letter protesting that their son was robbed of victory. The parents even threatened a lawsuit and swore that they would withdraw Tosh and his younger brother. Months after, the mothers again clashed during the PTA election, where Banky's mom beat the latter to become the treasurer. Perhaps what escalated the rivalry was the fact that the fathers of both boys were politicians and belonged to either of the two leading and belligerent political parties, Progressives on Congress and Democratic People's Party. Tosh's father, Chief Didi Oba, was not an ex-convict, although years back he spent 36 months in detention, facing trial for alleged misappropriation of a 2.5 billion naira government contract sum. The trial dragged for 5 years, but he was later released while his company was ordered to refund the sum. The court ruled that he was not directly guilty of the offense. The school initiated peace moves, but Chief Oba, also a top lawyer, insisted Banky and his parents write separate letters of apology to him and Tosh. He also insisted letter be published conspicuously in the school magazine. Banky's parents, however, rejected the ultimatum. First, they requested the video of their son's alleged offensive speech, which their lawyer studied and came up with the conclusion that Banky never mentioned the name Oba. Besides, they affirmed that Chief Oba's demand amounted to victimization of their son. Beppo was close to both families and hoped they would be able to pacify the aggrieved parties, but his moves were futile. Now, as he planned to relocate, the legal action instituted by Oba was nearing conclusion. He believed there was still room for an out-of-court settlement, having persuaded the management to explore alternative dispute resolution. Beppo was also upset that he would miss the Invention Club. He was particularly worried about the fate that would befall the 5-year-old bridge project, the club's filmmaking initiative, using recycled panels and chips. He was an active patron of the club, despite the fact that he was not a scientist. Beppo always argued that invention was not necessarily limited by discipline. The project had attracted media and government interest, with the school and an NGO called LifeGrid committing funds to its development. Beppo anticipated the day his students would conclude research and production, so that the school would announce to the world that it had manufactured a phone. He feared that if he left Nigeria, the project would derail, but if it cruised to completion, Beppo swore he would do everything possible to fly in from London and be part of the launch.
Chapter 9. Laughing Waterfalls. Stardom School had been on an excursion to Badagry before. In the past 10 years, it must have traveled there about 3 times. That included when the school organized a retreat for teachers, lodging them at the Whispering Palms Resort. On the part of the students, they visited renowned and iconic sites in the historical town. GSS1 students also went on an excursion as part of their Welcome to Stardom package, visiting the city of white sand and coconuts. While teachers, some staff and parents might have complaints about the school management, they could not deny its well-deserved credit for giving students great exposure and making learning fun. Apart from never lagging behind in the celebration of special days, Children's Day, Mother's Day and Teacher's Day, it organized parties, concerts and lectures that features experts from different fields. Some of these programs even took the pupils out of Lagos. During his 2 decades plus with the school, Beppo successfully sold to the management the idea of an excursion per term to a place of attraction within the country and an annual international excursion. There were few occasions when the management could not keep to the yearly schedule. Nevertheless, it kept the idea running over 70% of the time. Beppo wanted his students to have a thorough grasp of their country. He was aware many of them came from elite families that would eventually send them abroad after secondary education. He believed the knowledge the learners gained about the country while in foundation school would enhance their intimacy with the fatherland in the future, because many would never come back. Based on this philosophy, students of the school visited quintessential places like the Ikogosi Warm Spring in Ekiti State, Erin-Ijesha Waterfalls in Osun State, and the Owu Waterfalls in Kwara, which is the highest in West Africa, measuring 120 meters above water level and cascading 330 feet down an escarpment. The students also went to the Gorara Falls in Niger State. A symbol of Nigeria's rich tourist attraction, the waterfall exudes a gripping natural ambience and wondrous allure, and while they boast ever-gurgling water splashing against joyous reefs of lucky rocks, some of them radiate very interesting stories. For instance, the Ikogosi was in 1952 discovered by Reverend John SMCG from his mission based in nearby Igede, Ekiti. He had defied warning by the natives that visiting the springs could be fatal, invoking the wrath of supernatural forces. MCG, however, conquered the myth and wrote, "After seeing it, I felt it could be used for a good purpose. I discussed the possible use of it with some of the mission and Nigerian Baptist Convention friends. With the growing interest of royal ambassador work and youth work, we felt that it could best be used by building a youth camp. I took it up with the Ekiti Association and we decided to build a camp for our ROAs and GAs. The land was secured through the convention. The state government eventually took over the site and developed it for tourism purposes. The Gorara was said to have been discovered by a Gwari hunter called Buba in 1745, almost 2 centuries before some Europeans chanced upon it in 1925. The Erin-Ijesha Waterfalls, also known as Illumirin, was discovered in 1140 AD by one of the daughters of Oduduwa, forbear of the Yoruba. One source, however, notes that hunters discovered it in 1140 AD. Another yet says the site was discovered by a woman called Akinla, the founder of Erin-Ijesha town and a granddaughter of Oduduwa during the migration of Ife people to Erin-Ijesha. To show that Stardom meant business, it listed other waterfalls it planned to visit as the years rolled by. This included the Kwa Falls in Anegeji, Calabar, Asop in Plateau, Karu in Nasarawa, and Barup in Gembu, Taraba states. Also on Beppo's personally researched list were the Ahum waterfalls in Enugu, Owerri Ezukuka in Anambra, and Obuki in Cross River State. Others on the tour visit list were the Farinruwa waterfalls in Nasarawa State and the Matsage in Kamfachan, Kaduna State. Beppo records sadly that the students, when they visited Ikogosi Warm Springs, did not have enough time to see the Arinta waterfalls nearby. He hoped that even after he might have left Stardom, the school would one day be on the road to Arinta, a waterfall surrounded by many rocks, uniquely flaunting 7 distinct steps. Stardom had also been to the Yankari Game Reserve in Bauchi, the National War Museum in Umuahia, Abia State, the Hanging Lake in Ado Aweye, Oyo State, the amazing Kano Palace in Kano State, and multi-layered and culture-imbued Oni of Ife Palace in Ile-Ife. Beppo records that the students also explored the site of the tall Oramiyan staff, by which Oduduwa, the forebear of the Yoruba, was said to have descended from heaven, as well as the elegant abbey's of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, where Mrs. Ibudu Gloss graduated with a law degree. At national festivals too, Stardom sometimes stood to be counted. Its students had been part of the Calabar Carnival, Osun Osogbo Festival, Agungu Festival in Kebbi, and the Ofala Festival in Onitsha. Beppo believed Ile Latin Keso Rode, a Yoruba proverb meaning charity begins at home. Thus, Stardom students and graduates should have Lagos tourism etched on their memory. It was why the pupils regularly visited the National Theatre, Ikomu, Surulere, the National Museum, the Muson Center, and City Mall, all in Onikan. They had been to the Ekpe Fish Market, Ijede Warm Spring in Ikorodu area, as well as the Shongbo Erodo in Ekpe, Ijebu, described as a system of defensive ditches built in 800 to 1000 AD in honor of the Ijebu matriarch Bilikisu Shongbo. Other places they toured in Lagos included the University of Lagos, Akka, the Lagos State University, Ojo, Lagos State Broadcasting Station, Agejigbe, the NTA station on Victoria Island, an African Independent Television station in Alagbado. They had also been to the headquarters of several big companies such as Chevron, Lekki, Shell at Broad Street, UBA, First Bank, and Corn Oil Towers in Marina, Globalcom on Victoria Island, MTN in Ikoyi, and Nine Mobile on Banana Island. To show the student that life is a potpourri of opposites, the student visited high-class environments like Banana Island, Snake Island, and Magodo, and largely derided zones like Mushin, Adegunle, and Ijora. They also visited the SOS village in Isolo and other charity homes. Being born in a place like this does not condemn one to a life of penury. Beppo told the students the day they visited Ajegunle, "If you are determined, committed to education, make the best use of your talent, time will move you from slum to limelight." You will be surprised to learn that many of those you see on Banana Island started off in slums somewhere in the country. Life is about movement. It is ever ready to move upward folks who make the best use of their talent, money, and opportunities. He reminded them that music and soccer stars such as Odion Igalo and Victor Osimhen grew up in the low ends of Lagos. Under People's supervision and insatiable appetite for education by adventure, Stardom had been to the Iju Waterworks in Adiyan, the Yaba Psychiatric Hospital, where the students were addressed on the evils of hard drugs, the Oyasaf Foundation House in Maryland, which has over 7,000 artworks collected privately by Prince Yemisi Adedoyin, and Lagos Blue Rail Mega Station in CMS. But in the spirit of World Slavery Day, they were back in Badagry, where the excursion, led personally by Beppo, would have implication for his proposed relocation. Badagry is a significant town in Lagos State and in Nigeria because of its pioneering contact with Atlantic slave traders. It is home to monuments such as the first-story building in the country, built by Henry Townsend in 1846, and where Ajayi Crowther stayed and made the first translation of the Yoruba Bible. Badagry is the base of the Ajiya tree under which Christianity was first preached in Nigeria, the Mobile Royal Family Slave Relics Museum, which houses chains, padlocks, rods, etc., used on the slaves kept there, en route to the point of no return, and the Seriki Abba Slave Museum, originally built by an ex-slave turned slave trader. During the last excursion, the first port of call for the Stardom team, which comprised 40 students from SSS-1 to SSS-3, was the palace of the Akron of Badagry. The king hosted the people and served them some refreshments. The monarch explained to the students how Badagry was formed in the late 1720s by Popo refugees from wars with the Fon people of Dahomey. Its contact with white explorers and slave dealers made the town a harbor from which slaves were exported to the Americas. But the story of our industry is far bigger than that of the unfortunate slave trade, the king had said. We were strategically big in business, in agriculture and tourism. As far back as the 1820s, a British trading post was established here. We actually developed as a palm oil port, just as we were big in the importation of clothes. While the return of freed slaves in the 1830s also enriched our history, culture and business, coconut plantations had been established here by the 1880s. There was a comic interlude when one of the students asked Kabiyesi if it was true that the name Badagry was derived from Abadarigi. The monarch affirmed the story. Then the trip continued with a visit to the first-story building where the students spotted the first copy of the translated Bible. They moved to the first primary school in Nigeria, the Anglican Nursery and Primary School, formerly Nursery of Infants Church, located in the Tapo area of Badagry. It was established in 1843. They were also at the point of no return, where natives captured as slaves were thrown into ships that took them to western countries. These slaves were thereafter resold abroad and taken to the farms of white masters. At the Black Heritage Museum, Beppo was emotionally moved by the memory of the ugly experiences enslaved went through. This was after he had seen relics and listened to the narration by the museum officer. He felt Africans had always been targets of barbarity and embarrassment. That was what happened during the transatlantic slave trade between 1500 and 1900. But the principal had more questions. How, for instance, would anyone explain what had become the vogue? That is, Africans themselves, especially Nigerians, in Japa fit, voluntarily and desperately walking into the workforce of who seemed to be the yesterday masters. The new slavery, as he saw it, was what many were now dying to be part of. They were having sleepless nights, praying and fasting to get visas. They were selling all they had to pay fare. They are abandoning families, schools, work, businesses, and professions they built over the years just to escape the harsh environment at home and collect high-value dollars, pounds, and euros abroad. In the process, many took up all the oldest jobs and became the ever-whipping race, accursely rushing into enslavement after centuries of the transatlantic. The sentiment and resentment swelled through Beppo as he pictured himself also on the streets of Europe.
Chapter 10. Passport Pains. Because Beppo had not been keen on relocating abroad, he did not bother to renew his passport duly. The document expired 2 years earlier. Initially, he weighed the possibility of calling a contact at the immigration office in Lagos, Ikoyi. He wanted to put the staff on notice, but he did not do so in time. Then COVID-19 set in. This made renewal impossible. Even after the pandemic had lost its wars against humanity, Beppo was not one of the first persons at the passport office. At a point, he developed a phobia for the renewal, having heard tales of new rules household applicants were experiencing and non-availability of booklets. By the first quarter of 2022, when Beppo realized he could no longer resist pressure to travel from his family, getting the passport renewed had become an emergency somewhat. Besides the anticipated stress at the immigration office, the Japa syndrome had greatly swelled the number of heads turning up. The maddening rush at every passport office, especially in Lagos, scared Beppo. Since he could not afford to waste time or sleep on the veranda of some pot-bellied passport official out of the desperation for renewal, he had to explore other options. One of such was to prepare an amount larger than the normal fees, collude with an agent, or find an officer that could be bribed. He was told he would need up to 200,000 or 250,000 to have the passport renewed within a month or less. He could even have it in a fewer days if he was ready to drop more cash. Another alternative was to travel to the immigration service in any of the neighboring states, such as Ogun, Oyo, Osun, and Kwara. In these places, there will be less crowds than in Ikoyi or Ikeja. Beppo eventually settled for Ibadan, the Oyo State's capital, where he found the contact of an agent that could hasten the process. The government, as well as the immigration leadership, had repeatedly announced that the process could be done online or manually without bribing anyone. The use of middlemen had been outlawed with a threat that anyone found interfering illegally would be prosecuted. But as the agents in Ibadan told Beppo, the law existed only on paper. Making an attempt online could be very slow or erratic. Many people abandoned it halfway and returned to the passport office. Some even suspected that the glitch was caused deliberately to frustrate folks who would have no other option than pursue their applications in person. As Beppo found out, the so-called agents were actually working hand in glove with officials of the immigration service. Beppo spoke firstly with the agent on the phone. The man called Tai asked him to pay 100,000 naira for a 10-year renewal, 64 pages, instead of the official 70,000. The pushed-up charge was to expedite action to two major initial processes that included data capturing. After capturing, you could pay 20,000 naira to make the collection faster, Tai had explained. On a Tuesday afternoon, Beppo set out for Ibadan, hoping to keep an early Wednesday appointment at the immigration office. He planned to spend the night in the ancient city and be at the Agodi Gate passport office as early as 7 o'clock a.m., the time fixed by Tai. He decided he would not go in his car. It had been long since he traveled on the Lagos-Ibadan route. Besides, he was worried about security issues. At the Ibadan end of the road, there had, around the time, been few cases of kidnapping. fueling the fear that bandits had relocated to the area. The country was just beginning to have some respite security-wise, following renewed assaults by the military on insurgents and bandits in the north. The numerical strength of the criminals was getting depleted. They appeared to be seeking less risky grounds, raising concerns that they were finding a new footing in the southwest. Beppo felt he had better travel by public bus. He knew that no vehicle type was immune to onslaught by the scoundrels, but he was satisfied the commercial drivers understood the area better. He boarded a 6-passenger Toyota Sienna car at the Ojota Park. Unlike days when people faced heavy traffic on the popular road, the trip was entirely stress-free. This was especially the case between the infamous Ojota and Berger Kara stretch, up to OPIC, where the road led to Isheri's estate, the headquarters of Channels Television. The biggest surprise that awaited Beppo was that barely 15 minutes after, he had the other passengers would be touching down in Ibadan, thanks to the nearly completed reconstruction the federal government was carrying out on the road. The last time Beppo was on that route was 10 years earlier, when he led stand-up students on an excursion to Ile-Ife, Osun State. At the time, the expressway was terribly damaged. The journey, which now lasted less than an hour, had dragged on for over 2 hours. The road was now wider on both sides, at least 3 lanes each. The bus left OPIC Estate at 5 o'clock p.m. As a result, Beppo could still, before nightfall, observe developments on the expressway, described as the most important in the country. He wondered whether pundits arbitrarily arrived at the ranking. What yardstick did they use? Beppo chuckled at the thought of the question. It was the main road that led to Lagos, the country's commercial nerve center and biggest melting pot. Some had also claimed that up to 250,000 vehicles plied it there. Beppo believed the figure would very likely have increased. Perhaps the number of vehicles plying the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was growing in tandem with the country's petrol subsidy. Beppo smiled at his mischievous thought. The subsidy scheme was designed to make petrol affordable for the citizens, but with every passing year, the ever-growing billions of naira it gulped left citizens thinking the more they looked, the less they saw. Were the statistics enough to conclude that the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway was more important than, say, the road that led to Bayelsa, from where the country derived its largest volume of oil? Beppo reminded himself he ought to calm down as his mind was beginning to wander needlessly into politics. Apart from filling stations, which had increased in number, he found that religious organizations and schools had also taken up a larger share of space on either side of the road. In the past, it was the likes of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, RCCG, and Mountain of Fire and Miracles Ministry, MFM, that were most noticeable along the expressway. But things had changed. While MFM is the first big one you see on the left at Magboro, as you come from Berger, you would notice the Christian Pentecostal Mission on the right after Ibafo. Shortly by Asesi, you would get to the Christ Embassy ground, also on the right. About a minute's drive after, by the left, was the headquarters of NASFAT, the first major Islamic organization on the route. Adjacent to NASFAT, Nasrullahi Il-Fatih Society of Nigeria was the Deeper Life Bible Church, with the Redeemed Christian Church of God's expansive redemption camp nestling about a kilometer away. The religious organizations had all along been there before the construction of the road. Now, Beppo thought the grandeur of the new-look expressway was making them even more noticeable. While the conventional Christian and Islamic faiths stood to be counted, there was the Guru Maharaj base shortly before the Ibadan toll gate, whose arrival in the area was preceded those of many of the aforementioned. He pondered the multiplicity of religious organizations on the road and its attendant irony. Nigeria arguably has many religionists but few godly people. Beppo restrained himself at the thought. Was he not becoming judgmental? Were there not truly many good Christians, Muslims, and traditionalists? Was he, Beppo, a saint after all? He smiled. He was consoled by the fact that small business organizations were also springing up along the route. While the conventional Christian and Islamic faiths stood to be counted, there was the Guru Maharaj base shortly before the Ibadan toll gate, whose arrival in the area even preceded those of many of the aforementioned. He pondered the multiplicity of religious organizations on the road and its attendant irony. Nigeria arguably has many religionists but few godly people. Beppo restrained himself at the thought. Was he not becoming judgmental? Were there not truly many good Christians, Muslims, and traditionalists? Was he, Beppo, a saint after all? He smiled. He was consoled by the fact that more business organizations were also springing up along the route. This was the reason many observers believed the Oyo and Ogun state governments needed to take the acts more seriously because it promised a huge industrial base. Ogun particularly was benefiting more in terms of the number of companies rising here and there on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. These included Mikano and a multifaceted industry on the Long Bridge, Multi-Tracks at Wawa, which was distressed due to debt issues, Punch Nigeria Limited and LifeMate Furniture in Magboro. He saw the signboards of McPherson and Babcock universities. No wonder he thought Ogun prided itself as possibly hosting the highest number of universities in the country. Beppo observed that at the Ibadan end in Oyo State, some new business outfits were being developed, although their owners were yet to erect signboards. He noticed private universities springing up, including Dominion and the Oyo State government-founded First Technical University, both at the Ibadan end. He also witnessed some changes in Ibadan Township too. At Challenge, for instance, he discovered that a defining roundabout was no more there. The area had been redesigned to ease traffic congestion. He loved the sight of the brown roof his eyes caught as soon as the Sienna descended the Moonlight overhead bridge. The sight became even more phenomenal as the vehicle reached the top of the hilly bridge after Berry. The scene reminded him of the legendary poet J.P. Clark and how he described the system in a poem titled Ibadan. Beppo struggled to recall some of the lines. Then he asked Google, which answered him, Ibadan, running splash of rust and gold flung and scattered among 7 hills like broken china in the sun. Such an evergreen and intense piece of art. He, however, felt worried that decades after Clark wrote this piece, the roofs he alluded to remained obstinately brown. The buildings, mostly constructed with mud, could be seen at the Idi Arere area, Oja Oba Bere, and the Aremo Zone, and many interior locations. While searching on Google for Clark's poem, his eyes had also caught the title of a novel, Under the Brown Rusted Roofs, by Abimbola Adelakun. Beppo hoped to read it later. He remembered the innocent disgust some of the students expressed when they visited the University of Ibadan. They had followed the challenge route instead of Iwo Road, which the latter was more direct from toll gates. Beppo had made the stand-on bus pass through the belly of the city so that they could appreciate its ancient essence. They returned to the Lagos via the Agboro-Iwo Road. As they passed the interior of the city on their way to the university, one of the students had asked if Ibadan was a big village. Beppo answered that it was not. He explained that there were many elitist areas that include Ring Road, Oluyole, Bodija, and Akala. He also enlightened them on the political and pioneering status of Ibadan host to the first university in Nigeria, the first stadium, and the first television station, among others. By 6:40 a.m. the following day, he was already at the passport office in Agodi. That was the Ibadan miracle of commuting, never to be likened to Lagos. Because Lagosians always traveled with the fear of traffic palaver that is often their lot, Beppo left his hostel room at 6:25 a.m., fearing he would not be able to keep the 7 o'clock a.m. appointment Tai gave him. He woke up late, 6:05, having barely slept until around 3 o'clock a.m. His wife had called and engaged him in a lengthy phone conversation, and hard as he tried, he could not have her shorten the talk time. At the immigration office, Beppo tried to enter the premises before phoning Tai, but security officials stopped him at the gate, asking what his mission was. Beppo explained that he had come to resolve passport matters and needed to see someone first. The officers suggested he put a call across to the concerned, but rather than ask Beppo to walk in, Tai directed him to an open space opposite the office, which harbored several business centers. As it turned out, Tai was no immigration personnel and was not domiciled on the premises either. He was just an ordinary business center operator working in cahoots with some immigration staffs. While some would call the guy a consultant, others might brand him a racketeer. Beppo made payments to Tai, who retrieved and filled in details of the old passports. He also verified Beppo's national identity number, NIN, so that there would not be any issues during data capturing. The result of the check did not give an all clear to the principal. He would still have to visit the NIN office to validate his number. Beppo collected necessary data from Tai and went to meet the official Tai worked with. After exchanging pleasantries, the official took the documents in for validation. 15 minutes later, he returned with the old passport and asked Beppo to return for data capturing in 3 weeks. The applicant was happy the exercise did not last up to 2 hours. "Is that all for today?" Beppo asked the personnel. "Yes," the officer replied confidently. "That is what you paid the extra amount for. If you had followed the normal channel, you would still be there with them," he added, pointing to a large crowd of people seated or standing inside the hall at the entrance of the premises. "Thank you," Beppo said, handing the officer an extra 2,000 tip. The man received it gratefully, gave Beppo a business card, and asked him to return up early for the data capturing on the given date. He further reminded him to visit the NIN office first. But Beppo had a nasty experience at the NIN office. This was despite the fact that he wanted to, as the saying goes, be nice to anyone that was prepared to help him. Just as it happened at the immigration service. But network glitches were terrible. He had to wait 3 more weeks for validation, by which time he had already risked missing his travel dates.
Chapter 11. Point of No Return. A 3D banner stretched colorfully across the length and breadth of the wall that overlooked the stage at the main hall of Stardom Schools. The school's purple and black colors enlivened the background. A large image of Beppo laughing gracefully was on the banner, headline, "For he gave Stardom his very best." It was subtitled, "Memorable Farewell for a Most Committed Principal, Beppo Adewale." Not until the day many members of Stardom community never knew that Beppo had actually been the shortened form of Adebeppo. Confusion and debate concerning his future were over. He and the school had come to terms with the reality that he would depart. The only sacrifice Beppo had to make was to alter his departure date. This would give the management an opportunity to offer him a befitting farewell. He called Emirates Airline to inform them he would shift his flight by a week. For this, he He was asked to pay $100 fine, which the school gladly paid. The farewell program began on a Wednesday with novelty match between the school team and the staff. The event featured a lot of hilarious fraud as the games master, Mr. Ibe, who was also the referee, ensured the staff win with 3-2. Every time the student came close to scoring, he would blow the whistle, citing a mysterious foul play. Even the staff's second goal came via a penalty that readily had to be taken 5 times until the 5th player managed to beat Stadium's goalkeeper, Chido. So good was the young goal stopper. He had been invited to the country under-17 team, but in this abracadabra match, no one could really stop Mr. Ibe's voodoo refereeing. After the staff had netted the 3rd goal, 8 minutes to the end, the games master blew the final whistle, swearing the time was up. He had sensed danger that the lads could equalize and was not ready to take chances. But it was all fun as the player capped the game with singing and dancing around people. On Thursday, a debate was held in his honor. The crews was, the arts have contributed more to the development of the country than the sciences. Representative of SSS3 opposed the assertion, while their SSS2's counterpart proposed it. The opponent predictably sought to win the audience over by exposing the value of science in health, energy, technology, etc. The proponent, on the other hand, inspiringly shook the table by highlighting the fact that Nigerian arts, culture, and entertainment sector had blessed the country with more appreciable impact. They cited the fact that Nigeria had not won the Nobel Prize in Science, whereas Professor Wole Soyinka earned the Nobel Prize for Literature as far back as 1986, even long before our opponents were born. The audience roared excitedly, following the ingeniously delivered long before our opponents were born. It was an uppercut. Beppo was glad that Mary Am, the lead debater for the art, smartly landed the jab, which underlined the importance of modest humor in debating. He always stressed this as one of the techniques to be deployed at speaking competition. The art advocate also noted the role Nollywood had played in Nigeria's gross domestic product, diplomacy, and recreation. They even argued that music was at the time the nation's biggest export. At the end, SSS3 was adjudged the winner. Nevertheless, Beppo felt fulfilled at the brilliance, initiative, and conduct displayed by the students. He saw this as the fruit of a seed he had sown. He always believed the Yoruba proverb, "Bonire se ofin gbamo, èyí tó ti fi sílẹ̀ kò lè parun." That is, even if Onire se, the master carver, eventually bows out of the trade, the carvings he had bequeathed to the world will live on. From 1:00 p.m. to 3:00 p.m. every Friday, Stardom had sociocultural activities. That was why the school easily and predictably dedicated the program to the grand finale of the Beppo send-off. The choral group opened the floor with an inspirational performance. It was followed by comedy skits by the drama club, which principally imitated Beppo. Humorously, the comedians aped the way he often spoke on the assembly ground, with his trademark, other things being equal, by the way, and if you say education is too expensive, try, he always allowed the students to complete the popular saying by chanting, try ignorance. Of course, they also did not forget the principal pronunciation. Beppo might just have realized for the first time that he actually loved putting his left hand in his left pocket while speaking. Most revealing, perhaps, he discovered he could get naughty while reprimanding any teacher who failed to be punctual in class. An imaginary encounter the skit maker staged also indicated he was not immune to hot temper, especially when the teacher became lackadaisical. The last main offering of the day was a string of dances by the drama club. This included the Bata, Atilogu, Koroso, and Keno dances. The Yoruba Bata involved mathematical movements of the arms, shoulders, and legs fired by the Bata drum. Because the instrument was not available, the students improvised with the djembe. The Igbo Atulogo dancers dazzled the crowd with spirited body movements and acrobatics. Koroso, one of the popular Hausa dances, featured the performers wearing identical outfits and moving their bodies simultaneously. Beppo was delighted at the richness of Nigerian art and culture. He worried that he could miss this in faraway UK. Then the last dance came. It was the canoe dance of the Badagry people, which showcases the performers as travelers in a canoe floating on a river. Beppo recalled how 3 years earlier he had invited a professional dancer from the national troupe to teach the students the unique movement. That was after an October show he led them to see at the National Theatre in Lagos. There, the troupe performed the dance alongside other varieties from parts of the country. Even as he was leaving, Beppo was happy the dance had come to stay at Stardom Schools. He became more emotional when the dance transported him to Badagry, where he vividly pictured slaves and their agonies. Towards the end of the performance, he saw himself back at the Heritage Slavery Museum, watching a documentary on the inhuman treatment slave masters meted out to the captives. As whips tore the flesh of the naked slaves and blood oozed from their skins, Beppo felt their pains. Greatly distressed, he wondered why nobody stepped in to stop the cruel handlers. A flame of anger began to course through his body. As one of the men drew a sword and made to strike a feeble old slave, Beppo stood to his feet and cried out, "No!" Silence dropped on the entire audience. The performance stopped abruptly. All eyes turned towards the principal. Then, Beppo came to himself. He had been thinking deeply, very deeply, and had slipped into a dreamy state. The auditorium looked in amazement, wondering what had suddenly come upon the principal. It was Beppo's turn to improvise, and quickly too. He surveyed the many baffled eyes and then smiled. "I meant no school could have done the canoe dance better. None at all," he said. As the audience applauded, the drummers revived. The dancers picked up their imaginary oars and paddled on, in sync with the position of the djembe. In her remarks, Mrs. Ibudo Gloss expressed deep appreciation to Beppo for contributing what she called an unrivaled quota to the growth of Stardom. According to her, Beppo was so impactful. If she had her way, she would not let him leave. But we know that in life, we meet to part and part to meet. We can only wish Mr. Beppo success in his new place, his new country. She stopped and turned in his direction. "Mr. Adewale Adebepo, would you kindly step forward?" she asked. As the principal rose from his chair, the entire hall, parents, staff, students, guests, all stood on their feet in ovation. Mr. Beppo raised both arms high and waved at them in appreciation. He felt humbled. He walked steadily to the podium and stood at an arm's length from the MD, who had also joined in the applause. "Thank you very much, thank you, the MD said, as the cheers and whistling quietened gradually. Then she continued, "Perhaps I need to state this. I am not the one who employed Mr. Beppo. My late father, Chief David Ajay, did. He was the one Beppo met 24 years ago when he first came to this school. Unlike many others who faced our interview panels, Beppo only had an encounter with Dad that first day. He had submitted his application letter to my father. They had a chat after Dad had looked through his curriculum, vitae and certificates. Dad became stuck with him. It was a day in early September of the year. The arrangement they had was that he would resume on September 14, as the school returned from its long end of session vacation. There was a vacancy for English, so we expected that Beppo would resume the first day of the session, but he never did, neither the day after nor the third day, till the end of the week. We were worried and suggested inviting others who had applied or had been interviewed. Although Dad was quite concerned that paper assigned classes SSS 1 to 3 would miss out on precious study hours, he insisted we wait a little longer. Now that was quite unlike Dad, who would take no nonsense from any member of staff, let alone leave a class unmanned. But there stood Father making a case for a broadly assertive employee. There is an essential teacher in the guy, Dad kept telling us. To cut a long story short, Beppo arrived 8 days behind schedules. Dad registered his displeasure, of course, but he was glad that Beppo turned up. Now, I must stress, Beppo has from day one justified the confidence and faith my dad reposed in him. He has never betrayed that impression of an all-round great teacher which he gave Dad. Teaching flourishes on the pillars of competence, outspokenness, passion, empathy, and morality. Beppo is an embodiment of all these and all other qualities that a teacher may require to build great students. When he joined us, Stardom was still struggling to establish a name, prove itself, and break even. He, over the years, contributed his shining quota towards the realization of the dream, the golden dream, the Stardom's dream. Together, we have taken this school to the mountaintop. Teachers have come, teachers have gone. Principals have come, principals have gone. But Beppo's input is unique in the history of our school. He has a genuine passion for students. He connects well with parents. He understands and does everything to promote the vision of the school. He has indeed been a blessing to our business, and that is why I urge every other member of staff to emulate him. Mr. Beppo, it is a pity Stardom and indeed Nigeria is losing you to Britain. We hope you will still find a way to always reach out to your darling students. As you and I discussed during our meeting on Tuesday, please find a way to get your school in London to collaborate with us. We will cherish it and value the bond and mutual gains. At this point, she turned to the principal. I'd like to present to you this little token from Stardom. We will not give you a car or some electronic gadget because you are no longer in Nigeria to use such. Where you are going is the heaven and haven of good things. Hoping this will not propel some other people to want to run away. The MD added purposely, prompting laughter. Here is an envelope for you. Mr. Beppo moved closer to receive it. As he did, she held out her right hand and clasped his in a solid shake. The duo froze for the historic moment as the school's photographer went click, 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 click. Dozens of smartphone cameras joined in the race to capture the hour, the minute, and the second, when it became clearly clear that Mr. Adewale Adepepo would be seen no longer on the premises. The gift is from the management, Mrs. Gloss continued. From the depth of our souls, I may not have declared to how much. Several voices across the hall asked light-heartedly. Amid the din, one voice specifically yelled, 10 billion. Not a few people thought it sounded outlandish. The MD laughed off the inquiry and continued, but I can assure you that you don't need to go to any bank or malam to change the money. It's not in naira. How much? Tell us how much. Questioning voices persisted. Well, I should admit that it is also not less than $10,000, the highest Stardom has ever presented to any disengaging member of staff. The audience greeted the disclosure with another ovation. Thank you, the MD said as she stilled the hall. But meanwhile, it is a check, a domiciliary check, not cash, not raw dollars, as you can see how flat the envelope is. She explained as she stepped aside and offered the podium to Mr. Beppo. It was time for the celebrator to speak. The hall again erupted in applause. The principal took hold of the microphone. He readjusted it from Mrs. Gloss' 4 feet 9 inches position and brought it to par with his 6 feet 2 inches word. Thank you everybody, he said as he waited for the roar to subside. At moments like this, words fail to express sincere depth of appreciation. On behalf of my family and my. The principal pushed aside the microphone and buried his head on the podium. He had begun sobbing, audibly too. Not many were surprised. 24 years after he first walked into the school premises, what had become home to him, only few people really expected a tear-free parting. Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Adewale, the MD intervened. Our beloved principal is overcome with emotion. We quite understand that, she added. It was the moment of truth. From pockets and handbags, handkerchiefs of all shades white, blue, green, red, yellow, brown appeared as members of Stardom family dabbed their eyes.
Chapter 12. Dawn. Beppo was billed to jet out with the Emirates Airlines at 10 p.m. on Saturday. He knew boarding rides might not start until around 5 p.m., but he was determined to be at the airport as early as possible. He learned his lesson 6 years earlier when he missed his British Airways flight during a visit to his family. Although the plane had yet to take off, it had completed boarding when he arrived at the departure hall. His lateness at the time was due to sheer oversight. He had not carefully checked the ticket he bought about a month earlier. The flight had been fixed for 11 a.m., but Beppo thought he saw 1 p.m. He pleaded frantically to be reconsidered, but the airline insisted the door had been closed, preparatory to takeoff. He traveled the following day with the same airline, but only after paying a $100 penalty. This time, he was sure the flight was 10 p.m. Very sure. He confidently dismissed sarcasm and teasing by Seri, who repeatedly asked him to check his ticket to affirm the time. "I hope this time what you saw is not 1 p.m., she said over the phone on the eve of the trip. "I'm sure, 100% sure." "Well, I will still advise you use your glasses or ask 1 or 2 people to help you confirm." "The devil is a liar. My flight is 10 p.m. No lateness, no penalty this time," Beppo had boasted. The joke notwithstanding, Beppo ensured he left his Adini Jones Ikeja home earlier than he would have done, probably a year before. He stepped out by 3 p.m. In the past, he would have waited till about an hour. That was when commercial motorcycles, also known as Okada, had not been banned. Many people believed they constituted a nuisance in the city, breaking traffic rules and limbs through a lot of accidents. Yet, their fiercest critics admitted there were days they became the saving grace. When Lagos traffic became a demon wedged between you and a very important appointment, and you risked being late or losing a target, Okadas were the messiahs. Air travelers hoping to beat the traffic and arrive at the airport in good time knew this. Hence, they always hopped on the motorcycles as a last resort. But after some dilly-dallying on policy, the government banned them, clipping their nuisance. As he was about to call Uber, a ride-hailing service, he heard a knock on the door. "Mr. Beppo," the visitor called. He never mistook the voice. It was that of his landlord, Mr. Ogunwale. As he opened the door, he saw the man, flanked by the landlady and their 2 grandchildren, Jide and Kemi. They had come to bid him goodbye. "We guess you must be setting out by now," the landlord said, as the family walked in. "Yes, just thinking of calling Uber." "You will not need to. I will drive you to the airport," the landlord said. "Oh, that would be taking on too much. Please, don't inconvenience yourself, sir." "You have been very good to us, Mr. Beppo. That cannot be anything too much," the landlady interjected. "You have been a very good neighbor. I can't call you a tenant. You have been more of a family member to us." "I will follow you," Jide, the landlord's grandson, cut in. "To the airport or London?" Beppo asked as he shook hands with the boy. "London," Jide said. "You want to Japa?" 7-year-old Kemi chipped in. Beppo felt uneasy at the expression, Japa. He wondered how, at her age, Kemi knew the term and whatever it meant. As everyone laughed off the Japa humor, the landlord pacified Jide. Don't worry, we will take you along to the airport. Then next week, Mr. Beppo will come back to take you to London. Is that all right? Yes, Jide said, jumping excitedly. Beyond the Japa palaver, Beppo felt guilt that he would be abandoning Jide. He had taken special interest in the boy for about a year after he began coaching him on elocution and African history at weekends. It wasn't a paid affair, but Beppo always enjoyed sessions with the boy. Mr. Ogunwale said a brief prayer for the traveler, after which he returned to his apartment and moved out his car from the garage. It was a Honda Pilot, with a boot spacious enough for the anticipated luggage. Beppo packed 2 big bags and a smaller one. They contained books and wear in that order. His wife had advised he come as light as he could. Of course, that didn't include packing iru, locust beans, and egusi, melon seeds, ground with crayfish. She also requested the purchase of dry snail. He found the items at the big, well-patronized Oyibo market in Lagos, a famous hub for the delicacies. Ever bustling, a Yoruba proverb attests.
Ọjà Òyìngbò kò mọ̀ pé nìkan ò wá.
Which means the Oyibo market never gets to find out a certain person did not even turn up. Before D-Day, Beppo had sold his Pathfinder sports utility vehicle for 1.5 million naira. The price could have been higher, but he was satisfied it was Stardom's accountant, Mr. Jeremy Amos, that bought it. His deep freezer and electronics were also good enough for auction, but he chose to gift them to his landlady. Beppo, his landlord, and the 2 kids were about setting out when his phone rang. It was Mrs. Grace Ape, the vice principal. She had driven from her base in Oba to Ikeja and wanted to know if he had left home already for the airport. With her in the car were the accountant, Mr. Oyelana, and Mr. Audu. They had planned to join Beppo at home and accompany him to the airport or meet him there. He did not feel there was need for these, but he could not stop them, especially as they were already close to his location. He urged them to wait for him at Ikeja underbridge. 20 minutes later, he met them, and the 2-car convoy headed to the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, MM2. There was a light traffic, first by the roundabout leading to the MM2, then later by Nako. They arrived at the MM2 departure hall at exactly 4:07 p.m. Departures, the word boldly splashed on the building, ruffled Beppo's emotion. It was real after all. He was leaving. He stifled a tear. Mr. Ogunwale and the young ones gave Beppo a final hug in front of the hall. Airport personnel received Beppo's luggage and transferred it onto 2 trolleys. Beppo gave Jide and his sister 5,000 naira and asked them to greet Grandma very well. The kids chorused, "Thank you, sir." But Jide did not forget. "I will be expecting you next week. You must not fail, oh," he reminded Beppo. The landlord expressed gratitude for the cash gifts to the children. Thereafter, they got into the car and returned home. After the vice principal had parked her car, the Stardom Quartet walked in, keeping Beppo company as he went through the check-in process. They chatted about the parting feast at the school. Mr. Yenana particularly praised Beppo's contribution to Stardom schools and then added jokingly that all staff, most especially Audu, should borrow a leaf. "Well, I don't know why you singled me out, as if I have not been working too hard already," Audu said, adding, "The only thing I'm happy about is that it's not the accountant advising me on what I should borrow." "I am trying to understand your connection," said Mr. Amos, puzzled. "To borrow a leaf means to do the same thing the principal did," Mrs. Ape tried to explain. "That's not what I'm saying," Audu replied, smiling. "It's my turn to borrow money from the cooperative next week, and I don't want to hear a cock and bull story like a snake has swallowed the money." Audu was in his element. On his plans for traveling overseas, he promised he would never cry like some people, and vowed he would slaughter 7 cows the day he got a visa, even if it was to Afghanistan. Check-in started at 5:30 p.m. After about an hour going through security points and getting his bag checked, Beppo got his boarding pass. Seat number 56, window side, gate 2A. It was getting late for the Stardom team to hit the traffic-laden road back home. Almost all lived far from the airport. Audu, the wag, stayed in Ikorodu. A CRK teacher lived in Mowe, Ogun State. Only the vice principal and the accountant stayed in Oba and Ojudu, Lagos, respectively. They bid Beppo farewell and departed. The excitement of the past 3 hours made Beppo forget he had his phone in the inner pocket of his jacket, a compliment to a white t-shirt and a pair of black jeans trousers. He quickly checked the phone to see if he had calls. His fear was confirmed. He had missed some. The MD, former colleagues at Stardom, but more prominently his wife. She must have wanted updates about the trip, he thought. Yet, he could not make any call. He and the other passengers were already undergoing final scrutiny at the boarding gate. Promptly, Beppo sent a text message to her saying all was going on fine. After the scrutiny, Beppo heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed on a chair alongside other passengers. All waited for the boarding call, expected at 9:30 p.m. Barely 10 minutes after he sat, he dozed off and slipped into a dream. In the dream, he was at the Heritage Slave Museum in Badagry. Relics of slavery hung on the walls. He saw slaves and their white masters. The captives yelled, groaned, shrieked as they were whipped, kicked, and clobbered. Some were pierced in their ears, lips, arms, and legs with red-hot iron. After what seemed like a month of torture, those who survived the ordeal were moved to the point of no return. In chains, they filed into the ship, like sheep headed for a slaughter. Beppo began counting the slaves, even as whips tore their skin again and again. 1, 2, 3, 7 million, as the last man was pushed into the ship, already filled to capacity. The white man came to Beppo, pointed towards the vessel and said, "Enter." "No!" Beppo screamed with all the strength he could muster. Body, mind, spirit, and soul. "I said no!" he cried again, leaping up from the seat. A white airline official stood beside him, completely at a loss as to what was going on. Seconds earlier, the official had found the intending traveler fast asleep. He had whispered into Beppo's ears and tapped gently on his shoulder as the aircraft readied for takeoff. Some security personnel and bystanders, drawn by the noise, also came closer. They persuaded him to come to himself and hurriedly go on board. At 10:45 p.m., the plane took off as Beppo drifted between dreamland and reality. Monday, after Beppo's departure. Reality stared everyone like a boil in the nose. The weekend ought to have sufficed to brush off at least a little of the pains of his migration. But it did not. The hard truth waited for every student at the school gate. It used to be every Monday and Wednesday, Beppo would stand at the gate to welcome the learners brought by school buses and all parents' cars. A few students came by themselves. It was a display of affection every member of the academic community and friends of the school could predict. But here was a new era, Monday. Mr. Beppo, the principal, was nowhere to be seen. But it was during the assembly that the void became quite vivid. For the first time since all the students came to Stardom, Principal, as they sometimes called him, was not available to talk to them, gist with them, threaten them, laugh with them. The vice principal stepped in to address them, but Mrs. Ape's speech did not strike the usual chord. So the students thought. Everyone, including the MD, felt how low the mood of the morning was. "Don't worry, students. You will soon have another principal," Mrs. Ibidun Gloss assured as she took the microphone from the vice principal. The promise hardly assured the students' feelings. A few who dared murmured their non-acceptance of the appeasement. But just as the MD would say more words, a shout of "Principal!" reverberated at the gate. Was it a joke? All at once, everyone, looked in the direction. There he was. Yes, he. Beppo, of course, grinding arms wide open as the students rushed towards him, screaming excitedly. They swept him off his feet, bore him high on their shoulders, and began a frenzied dance around the premises. "I am back! I am back!" he cried. "I am here! I didn't go. I'm not going again. My heart is here. This is where my heart is. I am here to complete my mission." The man's voice was barely heard as the students gyrated to the school's victory song. "We are stars, we are stars, we are stars of stardom. We are stars, we are always waiting. We are stars and we have won. No night so dark, no cloud so mean. Yet Stardom School will win."